Okay, everybody.
Should be a touch screen, yep.
I'm going to call this council meeting to order. Tonight's invocation is going to be given by Pastor Ralph Hobroch, one of our police chaplains. So if you wouldn't mind standing for that, and then remain standing for the pledges.
Please join me in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, this afternoon, as we contemplate the great country that you have given to us, we rejoice that we can meet openly and freely to conduct the business of this town. That's a gift that you've given to us. May we use it to the best of our abilities. It's also the season of vacation, but thank you that you never go on vacation. You constantly have your eye on us, and for that we rejoice. We ask your blessing upon these council members as they go about their business. Give them the gift of wisdom to guide this community into even greater works for you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Ralph.
You're welcome.
Great job.
You all right?
All right. You all right over there, Murad?
Yes, sir.
You gonna wing it?
We can get started.
I was going to start anyway, so thank you. But I know you can, so I wasn't worried. So item number 4 is council comments. I'll just kick it off because what a great 4th of July. I don't know if anybody was in town this past Saturday, but we had a fantastic day here in Friendswood. The parade was amazing. I mean, I think that's my 10th parade, and every year it gets a little bigger and bigger. And now, left side of the street, James, Tony, did you notice the left side, when we're coming down, it's packed over there too. So people are filling in on the left side. I felt like taking my car over there to see them a little bit, but I didn't, okay? I didn't swerve into the other lane and scare you, but yeah, it was great. And then the show, the band was awesome. The fireworks were incredible. And I felt a little more up close and personal this year because a couple of those things, the debris was raining down on us. I was like, wow, we're right here in the middle of the frag. It's pretty cool. So you got to be heavily involved at that. So kudos to Parks and Recreation again. Kudos to our 4th of July steering committee. They knocked it out of the park. And I know you're already starting today for next year. And I don't know if the budget's going to be as big next year, but we'll see. I don't know how much those fireworks cost. I don't want to know, but it was great. It was a great show. Worth every penny. Anybody else? John Ellisor?
Ditto.
And a few words.
Same thing. Thank you to the committee and all those volunteers. It was great.
I agree. It was amazing, amazing. So thank y'all for all the hard work that goes into that by staff and volunteers. So thank you.
Robert?
Yeah, same thing, ditto. It just makes you proud to be an American, especially right here in Friendswood. So it's awesome.
Friendswood, Texas.
Enjoyed it.
Yes. Randy?
I'm going to back up a few weeks and go to the Friendswood Volunteer Fire Department pinning ceremony that I had the privilege to attend a little while back. First time there, obviously, and I didn't realize what a strong organization that is and how much they seem like family to each other, not just the family members that pin their proud recipients of their badge or promotion. So hats off to the Friendswood Volunteer Fire Department. Thank you for your service.
Well, good on you for getting over there and seeing that. It is an experience. Those guys are special, just like every department in the city is pretty special. Pretty proud of them. Michael?
Also got to help push in the new fire truck, so.
Nice.
Yes, I'm jealous of that. I'm going to drive that sucker, though. Chief? You got me? Okay. All right. Somebody with some nerve up there with me, and
I'll go.
you'll go.
I'll let you run it.
Okay.
You passenger it.
It'll be a big parking lot, don't worry.
So just to echo what Mayor said about what an incredible job the steering committee and staff and all the volunteers did. My dad, he couldn't make the parade this year, but he got out of the house, I think, late that afternoon, and he was like, there's no way y'all had a parade, how clean this is. And I think that's a testament to the community and the staff and the volunteers, so that was incredible.
Thank you. All right. Item 5, public comment. To comply with the provisions of the Texas Open Meetings Act, the city council may not deliberate any item not listed on the agenda. As such, the city council will listen to public comment and may, 1, refer the item to city management for further action, or 2, direct staff to place an item on a future agenda. During public comment, the public shall comply with the council's rules of decorum. Everyone desiring to present comments should have completed a public hearing comment card in the foyer and submitted it to the city secretary. Each participant shall give his or her name and address in order to provide a proper record. You have 3 minutes, and Dan Key, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Hale, thank you for your comments. We appreciate that, and we are a big family. I'm here to, my name is Dan Key. I live at 2204 Pine in Polly Ranch. My wife Judy and I are retired. She's a retired teacher. I'm a retired firefighter. I'm a life member of the Friendswood Volunteer Fire Department. I was a fire chief for 7 years, and I've been in the Texas Fire Service for over 50 years. I'm here today to speak to you, to comment and bring to your attention the dangerous conditions that exist in an unoccupied residence located at 2205 Pine Drive in Polly Ranch along Clear Creek. This house is across the street from my house. This two-story structure has been vacant for over 5 years now, unoccupied. It sustained structural damage from falling trees on the rear of the house and flooding during Harvey and again during Beryl of 24. There are hazards that exist in this structure. The owner started repairs. During those minimal repairs in 2020, sheetrock was removed from all the walls of the structure. Shortly after that, the contractor walked off, and no other work has been done since that time. So the house has fallen into very much despair and destruction. No utilities are on. The only minimal maintenance that's done on this house is the yard is mowed every couple of weeks. So this has had a very terrible effect on the pool. It has not been circulated or maintained with no utilities. All the entryways on the back of the house have been knocked down, so firefighters could not enter or exit from those areas. So this damaged, unmaintained structure and pool poses a life and safety threat to our neighbors, the citizens of Friendswood, and especially the first responders who might go there on an emergency response. It should be found in violation of building safety and health codes and subject to citations that require the structure and pool be brought up to code. We respectfully request that the city of Friendswood take these actions as soon as possible. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Thanks, Chief. Rod,
Sir.
on your list for tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. Next, Charlotte Permetti.
Hello, I'm Charlotte Permetti, and I live at 2203 Pine Drive across the street from the former chief of the fire department. Next door to us is the problem that we're speaking to, and those pictures that you have, I presented those today for your perusal. And to start with, thank you, City Council. Thank you, Mayor, for listening to us today. If you would please turn to the pages 2, 3, and 4, primarily maybe number 4, to reiterate what Dan had said, is that this house is unoccupied and has been since 2019. It's deteriorated, it's been red tagged, the meter's been pulled, so there's no electricity especially to the pool, which is a violation of the code. And we have no confidence that the owners are going to do anything based on what we're looking at here and what we've attempted over the last few years. There's no protection barrier, as you can see, around that pool. There's no fence, no lock gate around the pool, and whatever fence was there, Beryl took care of it. Not that long ago, a neighbor's dog fell in the pool. She happened to notice right away and went to that pool and rescued that dog, having to get in, to this ugly, yucky pool. Not too long after that, my husband stopped the same dog from about to do the same thing. We've watched turtles fall in it and never be able to get out. We have seen the code enforcers. We've been to our HOA, who said there's not much we can do for you. And we've been to the city code enforcer. We've been to the Galveston County Health Department about the pool and how to deal with this pool, mosquito larvae, whatever, and they only deal with commercial pools, is what we were told. So this house was red tagged by the code enforcer, Ruben Garcia at the time. This was 2 years ago. He was very prompt to respond at that time. He summoned these people once he found out where they currently live, in Dickinson, I believe. He summoned them to court, and they did not show. They had bids, the city had bids come out to bid how to cover this pool to make it safe, and we were told that the bids came in at twice the amount of what they were given per year for the whole city of Friendswood for this sort of matter. I'm here today to publicly let you know this is a problem. I've done everything I think I can do. I'm a grandmother. I'm really concerned. I have 2 grandsons that. And as if you go back to page number 1, you will see, I took pictures yesterday of Friendswood. That place, that pool today looks like a play area. You could walk onto it, you think it's solid ground. And what I want to ask is if you could help to allocate funds for the city to cover it, make it safe for our community. If possible, maintain and remove the algae and make this hazardous situation. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Charlotte. We will take care of that. Don Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am Don Johnson. I am your Harris Galveston Subsidence District appointee. And if you ever have issues, feel free to give me a call. I'm not up here talking about that today. I'm up here talking about, because I remain very active in trying to stay on top of flooding issues and drainage and all of those issues for Friendswood. And so really that's what I'm up here to speak about today, which was there was a meeting of the Clear Creek Watershed Committee a couple of weeks ago, and they had some really marvelous presentations that were made there. They were talking about what's happening in the upper reaches of Clear Creek, and it looked like, it was a basic plan that they were setting forth there with 4 detention basins being built up there and some conveyance improvements being made. Of course, we have 3 detention basins through our stretch of the creek at the Friendswood Regional Detention Basin on Dixie Farm Road, the Whitcomb Detention Basin, and we keep talking about the Blackhawk Basin, which has some really good figures on it. So I know during these past campaigns, there was some contentious comments made about detention basins being worthless, costing too much, but for the people that, are professionals and work in this area, that's a tool which, you can't just ignore and throw that away, because you can't just send all your water downstream and let it flood somebody else. Chapter 11 of the Water Code prohibits that, and we'd probably be sued in a skinny minute if we took that approach. So I hope as these projects progress along, we don't get back into another battle between the people that hate detention basins and, the professionals that are trying to, solve the problems for us. And you might just have to turn a deaf ear to some of those comments if that's what it turns into. If ever I can answer any questions or you want any more information, feel free to give me a call, because I have real good relations with most of the people in Harris County and the Army Corps and can get information readily for y'all. So thank you very much, and I certainly appreciate everything y'all do.
Thanks, Don. We appreciate you. Okay, item 6, we're going to get into some work session topics. Just want to remind council that work sessions are a little bit looser format. Randy, we don't use Robert's rules. If you want to say something, just, ask a question, just, don't step on anybody else, but, it's just sort of more free form the way we do it here, so I don't have to sit here and point out the different people that raise their hands. So 6A, discuss the City of Friendswood Master Drainage Plan with HAF, presented by Jason Beck and Kyle Outen with HAF Associates. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you.
Floor is yours.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate the opportunity, council members and mayor, to come back here and have a additional, working session to talk about the comprehensive master drainage plan that we are working on for the city of Friendswood. Myself, Jason Becker, I'm the project manager for the master drainage plan project. I'm a water resources team leader at HAF Associates. This is Kyle Outen. He's a project manager on my team. And we've both been working hard the last year and a half working on this project together. So the agenda, this is our third time being here, and so what I wanted to focus on in this presentation is providing an overview of some of the metrics that we use when evaluating different alternatives, and spending some more time in detail to walk through the different alternatives. We spent a lot of time in the last 12, 16 months kind of working out what those alternatives could look like, coming up with different metrics on how to compare them, and this will be a chance for us to kind of walk through that, see how they compare across all the different alternatives. At the end, I will go over kind of a brief summary of some important next steps as we look to wrap up this project in the coming months. So metrics overview first. There were 3 metrics that we looked at as part of this project. They are flooded structure counts, inundated roadway miles, and inundated area, acreage of that. So these 3 metrics are commonly used when discussing flood risk reduction projects. These are kind of the 3 standard metrics that the Harris County Flood Control District uses. And the reason that we look at these as a first, pass of how different alternatives are performing and how they compare is because they provide us a way to quantitatively compare alternatives. These are numbers that can be calculated based on the results of our analysis, and it lets us, compare quantitatively across the entire city, across all the different alternatives, kind of with a robust, consistent method. This is really important so we can look at things holistically, but objectively. We don't want to just say that we like this project because it's in this area. We want to take a step back and look at where are the biggest risk areas, and then how do we develop targeted solutions to address the specific issues in each of these different areas. We want to look at different ways that flood risk affects the city and its residents. That's why we have flooded structures, but we also have roadway miles inundated. This is important because we don't want to just look at structural flooding, we also want to look at roadway flooding. Roadway flooding is important because it affects mobility, it affects the access for emergency first responders. And so we're looking at different sides of the risk and how that risk affects, structures and residents and businesses. But we also want to make sure that it's important to note that there are things beyond just these 3 metrics that we want to consider. That's part of what the alternative analysis process is. Things like, how much additional right-of-way do you need? How much mitigation is needed? We just talked about, detention basins and not moving the problem downstream. That's a critical aspect of completing a master drainage plan. And so there are other considerations that make some projects important, some projects more promising, when you want to look beyond just those 3 metrics listed on the screen. Those 3 metrics, though, provide an easy way to quickly compare across, 10, 20 different alternatives to get a good sense of how is this alternative performing and what does that mean? If we reduce the water surface by, a half a foot, what does that translate to? These are numbers that people, decision makers, elected officials, they understand. And so that was the benefit side. That's how we calculated numerical benefits and some discussion of other considerations to consider when you're looking at different alternatives. We also developed cost estimates because obviously the next question after what does it do is how much does it cost? And so this is kind of a review from last time. We looked at TxDOT and Harris County flood control bid tabs from a year or two ago. This was a basis for how we developed our cost estimates for each project. We broke out project costs into several different kind of major subcategories. We wanted to make sure we included costs for right-of-way acquisition, for example. Mitigation. You'll hear Kyle talk about mitigation being a really important cost driver. We have to provide mitigation so that we're not having any adverse impact. In some areas, that's easier to provide. In some areas, that could be more challenging to provide. So we wanted to definitely highlight the mitigation cost of these projects. We also included a 30% contingency and a 15% engineering cost as the project would move forward into a design phase. And so these are broken out for each of the different alternatives. Again, to give you kind of a big picture, how much does this cost? And then what's really driving each of those costs? Is it the right-of-way? Is it the mitigation? So now I'm going to pass it on to Kyle to kind of walk through by different model area, the different alternatives that we have. And I will go back and wrap it up at the end with some kind of key closing takeaways.
All right, thank you, Jason. And then just before we get started, to remind everyone, the other kind of goal we had here was to look at solutions or alternatives that are not just only looking at riverine flooding driven by Clear Creek. There's other areas of the city that see ponding. There's other areas of the city that see flooding, potentially structural flooding. And so those are additional areas that we tried to look at and provide a variety of projects, both of high costs that you'll see, and then some of those easier to get either funded or just to go out for the city having funding already to accomplish. So I just wanted to say that as we get into things with the first project being near the Analia, Kings Park, and Whitehall subdivisions. So through these, I'll just kind of go through a description and a project cost, and then if you have any questions, as Mayor said, just speak up and we can do our best to answer those. But again, in looking at variety, you will see more influence on storm sewer improvements. Much of Friendswood is quite developed, and certain areas still rely on roadside ditch, but in some of these newer neighborhoods, there are storm sewer as the most prevalent way of conveyance. And so here we'd be looking at upsizing storm sewer system kind of throughout the neighborhood with a focus on Huntington Lane and then majorly along Brandywine Drive and then finally further south. But all that is upstream of the crossing at 518 to not disturb any of the outfall or improvements that kind of go through that parcel. We kind of kept that as sort of a no-go zone on areas we saw where a potential storm sewer was affecting a existing structure. There's some areas where an outfall would be going beneath or around an existing structure, and we didn't want to include those improvements to those areas. That would be really, really difficult to kind of have take effect. So from here, we look at project costs, and as Jason said, at times, our main driver is in mitigation, but here with us being able to provide surface mitigation or detention ponds, really it's the construction side of those large box facilities that are taking place beneath the roadway. We are maintaining this within the road itself, and so that right-of-way acquisition price is more so for the parcel to acquire. The other item, oh,
Just a quick question. The 12 by 5-foot boxes and the 6-5 box, that's for new boxes to be installed? Are there existing boxes there?
there is existing storm sewer, not to that level, or not to that size. And that is added into the cost is removal and replacement of both the storm sewer system and the concrete that was there.
Okay.
So as we move on into metrics, we wanted to provide at least sort of a bracket of storm events being the 10 and 100 year. But our main focus when coming up with these projects is the designing to the 5-year level of service. So it's roughly in that 10-year range where we see most of our benefit as far as roadway miles and inundated area. But it isn't really until you get to those higher storm events where you see flooded structures even introduced. So that's why that zero amount of flooded structure reductions is there. Is just in this project area, there were none at that storm. Yep.
So I noticed it has a negative beside the number. Later on in the slides, I noticed some others had positives. Can you explain that for me?
Yeah, so the negative will indicate that there's been a reduction from the existing or baseline condition. So this proposed project is reducing the inundated roadway by a mile. In areas where you'll see a plus, there's potential that that has added either roadway area or structures into the floodplain. So we wanted to be consistent with how we're presenting these metrics and ensure that there's nothing that we're, not presenting to you all. This is how we're seeing it and how, the project is performing.
I will add to that, though. Sorry, I was just going to say, on anything that says there's a plus, it would have to be mitigated before the city moves forward on that project, so we
So
can't.
it's the improvement plus the mitigation.
Correct.
So can you define inundated roadway for us as far as, how much water that is? Is it 8 inches of water? Is it there for an hour? Is it there for a day? Those kind of things.
I don't have the numbers for ponding duration
Yeah.
on me, but for inundated roadway, we have a threshold of, I believe it's 3 inches, so half of the curb. So anything below that, that's been remediated or removed from the floodplain is going to be presented here. In events where it's still ponding that I'll talk about, I believe, in the third alternative, you may not see that number of floodplain or inundated roadway removed, but there's still reduction in the ponded depths of that area. So just fully removed is you're beneath that 3-inch threshold or at the curb gutter line.
So I'm assuming that the pipe sizing that you've using here is to current day standards, whereas Analia was built in the 60s, so it was using quite a bit smaller pipes, and they weren't conforming to the 2, 10, 50, and so on. Is that correct?
Yeah, the effort, or what I mentioned with the 5-year level of service, is to have that roadway ponding beneath the surface and inside the storm sewer system.
In the 5-year?
In the 5.
Okay.
So the metrics in the box, I'm just make sure I understand.
Yeah.
Are after the project?
Correct.
Not now, not current.
Correct. This is post-project.
Post project, okay.
It's the change from existing conditions to what you would see after the project is complete.
Okay.
It's different.
How did you determine existing inundation in these different storm events?
Yeah, so very similarly they'll kind of tie into how we modeled or evaluated the proposed conditions. But most of it is based off of the available data from the city. So storm sewer information that we've been provided, plan sets to confirm that storm sewer information, and then ultimately, I think one of the biggest driving forces is the terrain surface. So using the latest terrain or LiDAR information. And then additionally, with the mention of several large detention facilities, we did include several of them, including the Friendswood Regional Facility, the Black Hawk Basin, with the plans that we were provided into the terrain to ensure that we're not trying or we're not providing a benefit in an area that is already going to be receiving some benefit. And then we essentially applied rainfall across the city and assessed sort of how the ponding reacted or how the terrain affected the ponding throughout the city.
To add to that, they did develop existing conditions and compared it to past storms to see if it calibrated appropriately. So in order to identify what benefits you're going to receive by these projects, they had to compare it to existing conditions. And those existing conditions were modeled and calibrated based on past storms.
Yeah,
The 10-year and I guess Harvey would be the 100-year that you compared it to?
well, we compared it to several historical storms,
Okay.
three. The 10 and 100 year were kind of the standard storm events, standard frequency storms that typically get evaluated. The 10-year is a more frequent storm that you would see. 100 years more severe, and so we kind of wanted to bookend it and see how does this alternative perform in a more frequent event versus a more severe event. And then to add to what Kyle said before, I mean, we basically built a new set of existing models, these kind of mathematical representations of how the city is draining. The reason that's important to note is that before, a lot of the flood risk information was based on the effective models, the effective FEMA maps. They looked at the tributaries of Clear Creek, they looked at Clear Creek, but they didn't account for a lot of the drainage infrastructure in the neighborhoods at the local level. And so one of the goals of this comprehensive master drainage plan was to build a set of existing models that looked at both riverine flooding from Chigger Creek, from Coward Creek, looking at Clear Creek as well, but also adding in all of these 1D, roadside ditches, pipe networks that Kyle was talking about. This gives us a much more complete picture of the existing flood risk in the city, and it provides a much more accurate baseline to compare our results when we look at each of the different alternatives. So that's how we got all the existing flooded structures, existing inundated area, and existing inundated roadways. That's all from that new baseline modeling.
When you used the storm sewer systems and increasing the capacity and volumetrics of those being able to hold more water, and then you incorporated the existing detention ponds, and there's going to be others, as we see here, some more detention ponds introduced. When you incorporated all of those, were you able to determine a credit value or some mitigation to what capacity we're holding within these new storm systems and within these basins? So no certification, a certification for no impact downstream we could use to convey? Were you able to use this kind of data for that?
You could.
Okay.
We focused on what is the mitigation estimate that we need to make these projects viable, not causing additional increased water surface downstream. There may be cases where you can use them for getting credits. That's always something that's worthwhile looking at.
I agree.
To explore. But at this level right now, the idea was to just understand alternative one, how much mitigation volume do we need? How could we?
Just to lower it within the roadways itself when we're looking at these.
Well, and the mitigation volume would basically say if we're gonna go in and upsize the storm sewers, because we want the storm sewers to hold the 5-year event, and there's no ponding in the 5-year, that's gonna mean that we have more water running through that storm sewer system. So that mitigation is needed so that we don't have that improved storm sewer system that then adds more water out in the outfall going downstream. So that's kind of why we wanted to look at each alternative case by case. In some alternatives, that number is smaller. Some alternatives, it's larger. Some of them, there's room to build a basin. Building basins are always cheaper than having to put mitigation in line in underground storm sewer systems.
Right.
But we want to account for that because that mitigation is critical. It's a critical part of the project.
Yeah, I can see that.
All right, I'll move on, but again, great questions and any others that come up, just feel free. So the second alternative that we were here to present in the Upper Clear Creek area kind of involves a partnership with Friendswood Methodist. In addition to increasing some of the storm sewer capacity within the nearby neighborhood. There's opportunity to work with Friendswood Methodist and expand the existing pond that they have on site that actually uses the storm sewer system as an outfall already. So that's one of those that we have kind of gone ahead and included in the right-of-way and mitigation costing, that there'd be the ability to work with them and provide a partnership that could extend also in creating and keeping that area as a green space. There's kind of a walking trail already that we would then have to also place around the new pond size.
And if you did that, to answer Trish's question, the inundated acres would be, for 10-year, expanded to 3.5. By being a negative number, the inundated area goes down.
It's reduced.
You're reducing the acreage around it.
In that table, for all of these slides, the negative numbers are reduction.
Reduction, yeah.
The metric in the proposed condition is lower than it was in the baseline condition.
Right.
On that, is there a beginning number? You're reducing the acreage by 3.5 acres from how many acres that are inundated in this particular scenario, for example?
I don't have the total with me, but it's certainly something we can provide. We have this kind of spatial data already and just thought we would summarize it as a reduction, but of course we can provide that number on what the starting was to what the new area is.
The final report will have existing, proposed, and difference for all these metrics for additional storm events as well. We just wanted to show a condensed summary right now.
Back to Michael's question about inundated roads, what's an inundated acre? What's the level of water in an inundated acre? If you
It is the
can,
same threshold.
3 to 6 inches, something like that.
Is where anything kind of below that was screened out. So you may still have some sort of ponding below that, but it's much less of nuisance ponding than anything that would kind of be greater than that 3-inch threshold.
Okay, one more question. Is there an acceptable range?
I think that's something that we work with folks to define. Of course, as the city manager said, if there's anything that is causing an impact, then it just obviously would need to be mitigated before going any place further with that.
So like structures or roads?
So there's industry standard, there's acceptable ranges in terms of what a community would be willing to handle within ponding for a roadway, for instance. Our current design criteria manual says you can have ponding within a roadway, but it has to be evaporated or drained within 48 hours. So prior council said that was a sufficient amount of time to allow for ponding in roadways. And then there's a national industry standard with regard to 100-year floodplains as it pertains to your flood insurance rate maps that is referred to. So these are being evaluated based upon those industry standard leaders, not necessarily our own internal policies. Ultimately, this body, meaning the 7 of you, are going to determine what the policy, what's an acceptable risk and what's not an acceptable risk based upon what you're willing to fund.
So I guess when you're talking, at least for me, when I went through this, I looked for structures, how many structures would be saved, and the roadways, how many would be passable, I'm assuming, if we increase the roadway. And if it didn't, then I looked at it as maybe not a viable project, but I could be looking at this wrong, so keep that in mind as you explain this, okay?
I think asking what's acceptable is a little bit subjective, because it depends on where you live, where you're standing, at the time.
Yeah.
If I'm standing in my driveway and it's ankle deep, that's not acceptable to
But
me.
if we're standing at the
but-
Friendswood Methodist Church,
Well,
and there's no building that's zero, and
right.
so that's what I'm trying to figure out.
And the majority of these storms, the biggest impact's going to be during the 100-year event. And keep in mind, this 100-year event is not the old 100-year, it was the post-Harvey Atlas 14 figure now. So it's a more robust threshold by which to measure.
And I'm guessing part of what we're trying to deal with too is that in Friendswood, we had little islands. We could not get from one side of town to the other because of the flooding, which I realized at some point in time, we switched to the roads being to collect the water versus our homes. I'm all for that. But when you can't get around your community, then that created another problem.
That's exactly why, like I mentioned in that beginning slide, I mean, it's so important to look at multiple metrics. Just looking at flooded structures doesn't tell the whole story. They certainly are important. We want to remove structures from flooding, but in some parts of the city, there's not as much structural flooding, but people's yards are flooded and the roads to their houses are flooded. And so looking at solutions that, you know, may have zeros in the flooded structure column, but may be able to reduce roadway miles flooded, inundated area, that could be tremendously beneficial for that part of the city.
Okay, I agree. Thank you for pointing those out.
Mo?
Yes, sir.
Maybe we could get EMS and fire to opine at some point, not necessarily during this meeting, on what is a passable road for them, you know, in an emergency situation. I understand zero is great on the water level, but, you know, that, I think you start health, safety, welfare on the analysis of this, and then convenience is another tier, so.
We can definitely look at it. The clearance for most of the trucks, because of what they have underneath, are roughly 8 to 9 inches of clearance necessary. But we can do that.
Keep moving on. So the next one is in the Dunbar Estates area. And so this is one of those ones that we've talked about where if there's zero flooded structures reduced, then it may not be considered as like one of the top tier ones. But in this instance, they're really in existing and in proposed conditions, we weren't seeing any flooded structures there, so those reductions were not there to be had. But what was there to be had is, again, back to that 2 to 5 year level of service where, and even kind of creeping up into that 10-year, where we see reduced miles, almost a half mile. It's the depth in that area that is the reduction. Being that close to Mary's Creek, there is good amount of inundated area and roadways. And in some of those instances, up to a half foot was reduced. That's the difference from that curb height. So we're moving from up towards your front door down to the curb or even less than that. And then one that has changed kind of from the last time we all talked, I think as we presented an overview of all the projects, is Alternative 4. It's designated with 4A as it's just moved from the original location. One of the things we were also looking at is what areas of available open space are there throughout Friendswood, and it's pretty limited with how much development is going on, both for new detention ponds that are already kind of laid out and where those would be. And so one of those sites initially was the Brio site, but we've since revised that to a location sort of south of Clear Creek, close to, I believe it's the Forest of Friendswood neighborhood, just north of that. We were talking with a resident that said that, you know, he had some parcels of land that he could potentially partner with the city on. So we chose to look at a high-level evaluation of moving that pond to maybe a more favorable site that could really assist with some of the flooding closer to the communities. So it's still in a high-level analysis phase as it came in a little bit late. But the overall sort of dimensions of that pond is providing just over 300 acre-feet of mitigation or detention. And sort of the results that you would see from that is in that area to the south, reductions in ponding and roadways in area of up to half a foot in the 100-year event. So we look to have that improve when you look at those smaller events as well. Initial cost estimates, we kind of used the same estimates we were looking at for other excavation on other detention ponds is in that 15 to 20 million range. But I wanted to make sure we highlight that you can sort of see running diagonal across the area is that those are 2 pipeline easements. And so at this time, as it is fairly high level, we are aware of there being potential of that cost increasing based on the depth of those pipelines and kind of the viability of this location. But it is providing more benefit than what the Brio site had previously been providing, and I think overall is likely a better candidate for our project, is why I wanted to continue to include it.
Does this tie into the Frankie Carter Park?
No, this is Brett Banfield's property behind the Forest of Friendswood, section 6 or so.
I know where that is. Okay. 'Cause I know there's another one we talked about closer to Frankie Carter. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Again, looking at available open lands and trying to see where we can capture some of the, or lower water surface elevations nearby properties, or even at the location of Clear Creek. There's originally an oxbow that sort of goes around north of the Myrtlewood Drive neighborhood. And so we wanted to see if that ponding already sort of eclipsed the oxbow and would head south into that neighborhood. So we tried to see what could we come up with to potentially resist that water, provide a little more volume to hold it or detain it, and kind of try to protect those homes south of the oxbow. At the time of performing this study or evaluation, we were looking at more so a detention basin, but I also want to include the evaluation of shelving or kind of cutting back to the bank of Clear Creek right there. It's been shown to be effective in other areas along the banks, but ultimately we're still sort of evaluating both the effectiveness of that as well as the cost. I have an asterisk up there just to kind of shine light on it, where I believe this is a Pearland property, and so there's discussions where we can potentially receive that land from Pearland, and so there's potential for reduced costs for this project.
Yeah, that's really a pretty interesting spot. If you look on the west side of Dixie Farm Road, that part of the creek is just really nicely shaved back. It's been completely desnagged, and as soon as you get on the Friendswood side of the creek, you'll see where that's already inundating there now.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's a pretty interesting spot, and I would like to see that opened up actually, and that would be a good spot, I think.
Yeah, it's difficult with how open it is.
It's just all of a sudden it's just
and it constricts.
abrupt.
Yeah.
So Pearland, in my talks with the city manager of Pearland, they're open to donating the property once the wastewater treatment plant that's currently on 1959 gets decommissioned and becomes a lift station, provided we can show a net benefit to the city of Pearland. If the models don't show a net benefit to Pearland, they would sell it to us rather than donate it.
Is the restriction the bridge?
No, the restriction's not as much as the bridge. It's, if you notice, the creek south of 1959 is a lot more bendy. The term that former sinuosity, yes, sir, that former council member Rocky, who's in the audience, had enlightened us with. The stream up Clear Creek upstream of Friendswood and sinuosity is relatively straight. It's about 1.1, 1.2. South of 1959 Dixie Farm Road, it's 2.7, 2.9. So because of all the twists and turns, as well as the heavily wooded banks, it slows water down considerably. I know the Drainage District has worked hard over the years to acquire property so that they can do some slope adjustments to the creek and remove some of those impediments.
So, sure.
Just one more.
Uh-huh.
So I know we're presenting these in shaded areas that are self-contained, but do any of them, and at the end of the presentation, you may say, so if we decided on alternate 5, it would also impact something else, or is that not?
So for this area,
It doesn't have to be this.
there'll be a couple layers. Well, I do want to mention something about this area, as it is upstream of the Friendswood Regional Facility. So if it ends up being that this is a pond, then there's not really any further mitigation that you'd have to provide as you're net removing. You're not, I guess, adding any earth to the floodplain. But if we do a shelving project, then the Friendswood Regional Facility would already be in place to accept that mitigation for that project. But each of these areas, and maybe it's a difference in using the word impact, they are providing mitigation for their project. So any of these projects that you see, there's mitigation allowed or provided so that you are not impacting somebody downstream. And I use the term impact in a way as you're not adversely sending more water, increasing floodplain, or increasing elevations. So does that answer your question?
The two main factors, and I'm sorry for interrupting, that impact drainage are going to be timing and capacity. So the detention ponds themselves will hold a certain amount of water, a volume that can be defined. The other component is timing. How long can you retain those waters so that they're not impacting folks downstream? Shelving projects inevitably remove the impediments to the flow of water, so it allows water to go down faster. That's why detention ponds are looked at as mitigation and shelving is looked at as simply conveyance.
And just to add on to that, I mean, like Kyle mentioned, each of these alternatives is kind of looked as a standalone solution. Mitigation is there to make sure that there's no, increase in flow or water surface elevation rise, but that's kind of covering the specific improvements for that alternative. What we can talk about later on is, some of these projects are going to get phased. As part of the master drainage plan, we're going to provide a complete list of prioritized projects, and you'll see, as we go through these slides, the range in cost dollar. And so some of the more expensive projects will be phased, and that will then say, okay, well, in phase one of this project, you may look at putting in the mitigation first. And then when more money becomes available, you work on phase two, and that's the street storm sewer improvements. Phase three is the street storm sewer improvements over there. So there will be a phasing discussion as part of the ultimate report, because some of these large projects, breaking them down into more manageable pieces help you, or number one, kind of have a funding strategy and also help get to ultimate implementation versus just trying to get this one big, large project done.
Yeah, this is multifaceted and multi-year. All of this, based on the numbers that I'm seeing, is multi-year. Into the future, we're going to have to, in my opinion, reach out to not only our partners and that such, but grant money and see if we can't get some partnerships and leverage by partnerships, because, I mean, the dollars here are incredible.
The only thing I would caution that directive is on the regional projects such as this, we can get partners either with drainage districts or flood control districts. As we demonstrated from the 2019 bonds, converting 41 million into 120 million. On the storm sewer projects within neighborhoods, there are no partners. We did get lucky. You may notice a few slides back, Virginia Lane was highlighted. We got a CDBG mitigation grant for that because we met the LMI threshold at that one street out of it was a microcosm over a larger area. So there are not going to be partners for those storm sewer endeavors.
Who was the contractor that we hired to help us with our grant writing? Are they still under contract with us?
It varies depending on the project. So the majority of what we received in 2019, they're sitting in the room. It's Hill and Samantha.
And one of the parts of the MDP will be a funding strategy and looking at how we can line up some of the project information so that it's ready to go after funding. Obviously, certain projects will be more eligible than others for different funding sources, but that's an important part. We understand that funding is critical. Outlining a roadmap for these projects to be completed doesn't really do any good if there's not a high-level funding strategy in place that can be refined and continue to be modified as new funding becomes available, different funding programs become more available. So that will be definitely covered in the report as well.
All right, and then I think it's the last project area for Upper Clear Creek, and that's the Forest of Friendswood neighborhood. So just south of that alternative 4A. This looks more at identifying storm sewer that was undersized and what can we do to upsize that and provide additional capacity, and move things to that 5-year level of service, where just in the 5-year, there are reductions of ponding within roads, again, up to roughly half a foot, I guess in the 10-year rather, and then more so removed in that 2 and 5-year. And then here, I think this was close to that storm, or that basin just to the south, where we've also received some information of a lot of ponding that does occur just south of the basin in the wooded area. The name is leading me on what that basin is. But that kind of ties into there and including improvements along that location. That's what the surface detention is expansion of that existing pond.
So that's the Forest of Friendswood detention pond that's just south of there, so that HOA maintained facility.
I'll move on to, this is just an overview of kind of where those projects exist. Spatially, as we were very zoomed in on each of them, and kind of how they are around Clear Creek, as well as Mary's Creek there to the south. So we'll move into Lower Clear Creek now, where we have a few projects to discuss. With the first one being the but establishing one consistent pond throughout the HOA located nearby. And so this is one of those spots where you see those plus numbers in inundated area. And so really what that is this location has 3 individual ponds that are all different elevations, providing different amounts of storage. But between each of those ponds are berms that separate each of them. And so the area added here is those berms that are essentially being removed for the establishment of one complete pond.
So the actual inundated area is a misnomer. The berms themselves.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because those were high enough before where they were outside of the floodplain in these instances, especially the 10-year, it's more prevalent as it's a lower volume event. And so now that those have been removed, it's adding area to the floodplain, but it's essentially just the pond bottom, not any flood risk to the neighborhood.
No.
So with this project, as it does help to establish a little more volume and a little more consistency to the neighborhood. We wanted to see if we could expand some of that benefit and addressing some of the storm sewer of the local neighborhood that drains into the pond. And so in this instance, we targeted slightly higher than that 5-year to see, what value could we get for some of the larger storm events, as its proximity to Clear Creek is quite high. And so that 10-year roadway inundation is nearly half a mile removed within the area. But we weren't really seeing much ponding existing outside of those roadways, where you see it more so in that 100-year event, where you start to see some more riverine flooding from Clear Creek starting to take shape in the area. And so one that is definitely the largest of the alternatives that we were looking to address is, in a way, a regional solution, but with storm sewer. This was an area that was hit pretty heavy with Harvey. I think we have a slide after this that looks at roadway ponding from Tropical Depression or Storm Arthur. So we identified areas of storm sewer that were undersized kind of throughout this entire neighborhood area, which was a lot of it. And so it's looking at upsizing many of these locations, and then something we also hit on was just the cost of mitigation when maybe we don't have the availability of surface detention. It's a lot less effective, or not effective, but a lot less efficient having to place all that volume beneath the ground in conduits or boxes. And so that's why that number, is 3 times the cost of construction. But in talking with the city and folks, is there are available or potentially available ponds within the neighborhood themselves that it sounds like they, not even in Arthur, and at times they aren't really filling out to their capacity that maybe they were provided for. And so that's one of the options that we're trying to look into also, is the feasibility of moving some of that detention from being additional underground detention to surface to really knock a lot of that price down, but still be able to keep the benefit that we're seeing with this project. So that's one that I think from now until the report comes out, that the numbers may change there on being able to move that water into a pond, a facility that's already developed. There's no additional excavation costs needed, and outside of that kind of underground detention. And this is the image that I was mentioning there in the neighborhood. And so finally, for the last of the Upper Clear Creek projects, one location we saw that was an easy get is locations where there was roadside ditch that maybe was undersized at the time. It's maybe filled with sediment. Some of the culverts are filled in. And so one of those areas is here in the Friendswood Forest area. We're seeing a lot of, not necessarily roadway ponding, because the roadways were at an elevation, so it drives water into those ditches. But really quickly, water was cresting those ditches and making its way onto people's properties, parcels, and kind of getting very close to potential structural flooding. So we identified a new flow line and regrading of those roadside ditches. And that cost includes replacement of driveway culverts and the driveway sections that would need to be replaced. It's definitely in that ballpark where it's a project that the city can take and run with now, and maybe doesn't need any additional funding sources, but it's something they can see in the ground right away.
Shovel ready.
I'll remind you of that when we start talking budget, but yes. Yeah.
Again, just to highlight kind of spatially where things were, I saw after I sent this out, there is a mistake on this slide in that big pink kind of spaghetti area at the top that's highlighted as CLL03, that is 02, that correlate with the other projects we just talked about. So I apologize for that. So we have a couple projects now moving into Coward Creek. I'll pause if there's been any questions that I hope I didn't skip through, otherwise I'll keep going. All right, so the first project is looking along Brigadoon Lane, or Brigadoon Street, sorry, and Chester Drive. This is an area that I think, even though there is a channel or a ditch, a conveyance ditch just to the south, I believe, of Chester Drive, we were seeing a lot of ponding that kind of extends up Brigadoon and kind of just stays there. It has difficulty getting into the existing storm sewer and eventually out into Coward Creek. So this is one of those areas that we identified as higher risk, higher flood risk in our problem area and flood risk assessment. And saw that extending some of that storm sewer system into those roadways or those streets that previously didn't have any storm sewer there, was relying on grading to move that water, has given a lot of benefit of removing both area and roadway, inundated area and inundated roadway as it conveys runoff down towards Coward Creek. There is an existing pipeline that kind of is right on the outskirts or the north portion of where the project extents are at Chester Drive and Brigadoon. So we wanted to, it doesn't look like it conflicts now, but with the level of assessment here not being a full preliminary engineering report, it's important that we are at least conservative in identifying areas where there is potential extra costs that may come, and that's why you see it added on the estimated project cost as that pipeline relocation.
And under inundated acres, would that include people's yards?
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
You may recall this was one of the more frequently flooded areas during Harvey was Brigadoon. And the impediment was the pipeline that was just on the
Yes.
northern end of that.
And the final project for Coward Creek is in kind of along Shadow Bend Avenue and Woodlawn Drive. And so, again, this is more of a combination system that we saw. There's some roadside ditch area and some storm sewer area nearby, but some of it wasn't consistent in how it kind of connected to each other. So that's what this sort of is establishing a connection and reducing any potential conflicts of getting runoff in and out of the area. I know the way the project layout or footprint is shown kind of encroaches on some of those old oak trees there on the southern border. Again, to ensure that we are including potential costs to come if and when these projects proceed forward. We have included additional tree protection enhancement, but that would also come in an more fleshed out, full environmental assessment when these go to design. I said it was the last one, but there's one more in Coward, and a lot of these projects have been looking at storm sewer. You've seen a lot of, but one of the challenges of identifying projects is the level of water in some of these larger channels. So Coward Creek, Clear Creek, and we felt it would be, not a complete master drainage report without identifying at least, or presenting what it would be, what could it be if we did a full channel improvement, including widening, to lower that water surface elevation within Coward Creek that then kind of, enhances some of these projects or eliminates some of the issues that are seen in the existing conditions. So I think, Jason, you had a couple things to say as well.
Yes. So, I mean, these type of projects, which, are done in all sorts of other master drainage plan studies, they tend to be more expensive. I mean, you're looking at wider, larger scale improvements. They tend to often require additional right-of-way purchasing, especially up along the banks of these channels. And so that's one of the things we wanted to bring up to council in the discussions with the city to understand, the level of interest in looking at an alternative like this. Some entities are like, we don't want to even entertain that. Other ones are more open to it. The reason that we wanted to at least bring it up for discussion is, like Kyle said, doing a large channel improvement project, while it may require additional mitigation, be very expensive, need to be phased. If you lower the water surface in Coward Creek by a foot or Sugar Creek by a foot, you can impact a half a dozen or a dozen local drainage systems. And when that water surface goes down in these tributaries, then you start to see some of the benefit of that beyond just the creek itself. And so they are effective flood risk reduction tools. Usually you see them done, as sort of here's the big project. They tend to require more coordination, more money. But when you have that done, then you can kind of start bringing in your local improvements to get really a holistic solution. And so this shows an example of Coward Creek, but I think Sugar Creek was another one too. Those two would probably be good candidates for looking at an improvement like this. This is showing this whole segment highlighted in green. You don't necessarily have to improve all of Coward Creek, but the idea here is that you're doing something significant enough to really bring the water surface in these creeks down.
Can you tell me what improve the channel is? I mean, what, are we talking about terracing and?
You could look at two different things. You could do terracing, benching. You could completely, regrade the ditch in areas where you want to widen it. You can, widen the ditch out. You can bench the ditch out. It depends on.
You're referring to creek as a ditch.
Yes. Yeah, the creek, yeah. So you can widen out the creek. In some cases, you look at kind of really smoothing out the bottom of the creek, and so you're getting more efficient drainage out there. I mean, there's a bunch of different things that you can do depending on the site conditions.
But we would have to verify that there's no impact to Clear Creek, because by doing that, you're sending water to Clear Creek faster.
Yes, you would, correct. You would need mitigation for this, just like you would for any other project. And you would probably need more mitigation for this, because you're talking about doing a bigger scale improvement, whether you're widening or, benching. The benefit, though, is you would be able to see in all these local systems that dump into Coward, you're lowering the whole system, and so that's why they definitely are part of the comprehensive solution.
This is more of a long-range, big picture
Yes, yeah, I mean, this is.
component to the overall solution.
Right, and this is one that obviously would be a prime candidate for phasing. It deserves to be looked at. It doesn't always move forward to, yes, we want to design this and implement it. But it's, in this case, given the influence of some of these different creeks and all the local systems.
Something like that would have to be tied into some other things that are going on in Clear Lake itself there are a whole lot of people looking at this sort of thing, and I think this would be something that would come through the federal government and the Corps of Engineers, and there would be a whole lot of other people coordinating with this type of lowering the creek level, which would be a huge impact for our entire drainage system. But there's a lot of other people that are looking at this particular area and Clear Lake itself. But it's definitely not something that the city of Friendswood has historically attempted to try to do, because our storm systems is what we try to get to the creek, and then we let the big boys and feds and the Corps of Engineers and and Congress and the state of Texas and some of those with some deep pockets do something like this.
So just to give you some perspective, if this council were to say, this is our #1 project, we want to do it, the Corps of Engineers have been evaluating Clear Creek in this very same manner since 1968. A similar undertaking would be required for this to ensure that there is no impact to Clear Creek because of the widening of Cowards Creek. So the mitigation is a key component. So much like in 2012, they did the reauthorization, and in 2018 actually gave $190 million to Harris County Flood Control District for Clear Creek. We're still now 8 years removed from that, and they still haven't been able to move forward with that project because they haven't been able to mitigate it sufficiently. So just keep that in perspective. So I don't want y'all to say move forward on this and then expect that shovels to be turned tomorrow.
So do we even have the authority, or we'd have to?
We do not. So it would be we don't. It would be the local drainage district or flood control district in partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the General Land Office.
But if, for some reason, we did do this project, would it mean you wouldn't have to do all the others that we just looked at?
No.
It would not. Okay.
They're complementary. You may be able to do less a large extent of them to get the same benefit, but I mean, those are focused on the local systems. This is really more on how can we get the receiving part. This is a big creek, it drains a lot of other local systems, and so there's a lot that would go into this, but we wanted to at least bring it up, include it in the report, because for a comprehensive master drainage plan, we feel like it wouldn't be complete without talking about how you could reduce water services along these major tributaries.
Thanks, Jason. So again, to kind of go over where some of those projects were, just spatially, and we presented on project 3 and 4, and this kind of shows some of those other projects that while we are presenting roughly 15, there are some that we have already gone through and sort of screened out as well. That we'll be discussing in the report. So moving on to Chigger Creek, starting with the first one being located near the roads of Falcon Ridge and White Wing circle. This is one that I kind of mentioned we're trying to stay away from any improvements in storm sewer or pipes that are going already through existing structures. Some of that has been on outfall pipes. In this instance, it was on two sort of storm sewer lines that run from inlets on White Wing over to Falcon Ridge. They were smaller 24-inch pipes that weren't really conveying all the water needed across there. So we've gone through and added a new storm sewer line up that street to handle some of that conveyance or that runoff, as well as improvements to Falcon Ridge itself and down into the outfall of that tributary of Chigger Creek. This is similar to that second alternative that I presented on Lower Clear Creek, where the mitigation is, higher than the construction in this area, just based on its difficulty to mitigate within the beneath the road, as there's really limited surface options. There is an option in the neighborhood park next to the pool that you can kind of see in the south side of where those two streets meet. That parcel is an open area now, so it could take on some of the needed runoff as we route to that location and still have it maintain its recreational facilities or uses at that area.
Do you have an estimate of acre feet that you need?
I have an estimate of all of them, but I don't have it with me
Okay,
here.
yeah,
I'm
just-
sorry. They sort of blended together.
Yeah, there's probably some downstream opportunities, some existing ponds that could be rectified or modified.
And so still kind of on that same sort of tributary of Chigger Creek, there's a neighborhood, the San Joaquin Estates, that we were seeing having difficulty of getting water from the neighborhood out of that neighborhood. So some of that was being driven by the higher tailwater within that that waterway. So at the time, or at this time, I think it's a 2-barrel system with 2 barrels capped and plugged, culverts that go beneath that bridge right there. So we looked at the option of opening up that those barrels to see if we could move some of that water further or faster out of the neighborhood and reduce that ponding duration. And so in this area, we see reductions within the road of up to, I think I have 3 inches written down, so about half the curb. That added roadway miles, I think that's one of the locations and sort of one of the tricky parts of some of these large-scale models, and that there are levels of uncertainty where even the 0.07 reduction is not, that's 200 feet of roadway and not really moving the needle at all. So essentially they both are not really removing flooded roadways themselves, only lowering the ponded elevation within them. The next project is in the Glen Shannon subdivision. This area, we had seen some difficulties again in water just moving to the outfall, both this area and the one to the west, kind of in the shaded area on the left of screen. But both instances had sort of deficiencies in their outfall pipes, being kind of undersized. But this area, we saw additional undersized pipes throughout each of the lateral streets. And so we wanted to take that opportunity to increase the capacity of those systems and improve sort of the ponding again in the streets. In an area where we weren't really seeing many homes flooded, but a lot of ponding both in the yards and the roadways of that subdivision. And then another one of trying to utilize open space, and sort of one that has been a project that we're trying to optimize to provide benefit or additional benefits. And I'll kind of describe why the numbers look sort of odd, where you have added roadways to the floodplain, though you have reduction in area, which doesn't quite make sense on paper. And so what some of that is the added, or the reduction in area is you're introducing or cutting out a lot of that area for a pond, but what you're also doing is adding a berm around that area, and so that new berm of higher elevation that previously was in the floodplain is technically removed. So that's why you're seeing sort of the numbers go back and forth there. But to stay on the numbers of the inundated roadway miles being increased and essentially adding small pockets of ponded roadways, some of that is into us trying to further optimize this solution. We initially targeted a lot of sheet flow we were actually seeing from the old golf course, kind of encroaching on the backyards of homes, and sort of you were getting flooded from the front, where ponding was, you know, coming over the curb in your road and hitting your front door, but also from behind your house. So this was more so like a catchment basin to take some of that water away, and did its job in reducing those elevations. But I think there's more level of adding additional area. We have a lot more of the golf course to identify as areas we can add storage. But also at this time, because we were capturing that sheet flow or unmanaged water kind of going across the ground, we weren't focused on routing water from those streets into the pond. So that's another option that I think will change those inundated roadway miles to reductions by moving that water from the road into the pond rather than in their existing system that's sort of undersized in the area.
What's the new subdivision down there that's next door to Sun Meadow?
Friendswood Trails.
Friendswood Trails. In your sheet flow and the water that's coming into this neighborhood, was the newly elevated property for that new subdivision or recently new subdivision taken into account, or were these models done from previous data? Or, in other words, do we know if that new neighborhood is impacting the water coming into that neighborhood?
Yeah, I understand. It's and that's the property that's just on the west side of Chigger Creek.
So it's on both sides of Chigger Creek,
Like
and
right
it's in,
behind the legend.
correct, on the southern end of that.
So in our current models, I don't think, because that area is so new, that the LiDAR or terrain that we had incorporates that. But there is updated LiDAR that is slowly coming out that I think is, you know, this could be a case to add a tile of that to really see if they are contributing to Chigger Creek. But the other side of it is that neighborhood, there's systems, criteria, as the manager mentioned, that they should be following and adhering to, where they wouldn't be releasing any additional runoff or water into Chigger Creek or across.
And the reason for my question is, and I understand they have to comply with the flood mitigation and all the detention and whatever the rules are. Is it working? And that's what I just was curious if we could tell.
So we can definitely look at the new LiDAR information. As I mentioned 2 council meetings back, anecdotally, it is working. So in Harvey, we had 2,700 homes flood, 18% of our housing stock. Of those 2,700 homes that flooded, 95% of them were built before we had any tangible flood mitigation requirements. So the 5% that flooded post-95, we fared pretty well. It doesn't mean that we don't have work to do. It just says that the rules that are in place are working.
Mo, a quick question. On all of these stormwater sewer projects, how confident should I be that those older systems are clear of debris, they're clear of spill? Hill, you may want to answer this.
So
I know that we have certain situations over by Home Bank where the Jack in the Box was, and we had cups and that kind of thing always clogging up that sewer system. How confident should I be that our older systems are already clear and adequately cleared by the city as they are built right now?
So that confidence level is, it varies depending on location. So each month I send you all a report of the number of, our linear foot of storm sewer lines that are cleared. But we constantly have folks that when they get their yard mowed, they blow their clippings into the storm sewer system. Anytime we had a rain event last week, and when I got home from vacation, I noticed quite a bit of tree branches in the yard, not just the yard, but in the street, not from my trees, but from everybody's trees. And so homeowners need to proactively get out there to remove it. We sweep the streets routinely, but we only have one sweeper and one crew that does not just that, but several other things. So if y'all feel that there is a blockage, not just you, but residents, contact the city. We will go TV the line, meaning we stick a camera in the line to identify the blockage, and we will clear the blockage. Public Works crews do that routinely. I wouldn't blindly accept it and say all the lines are clear, because inevitably they will silt up over time. And then, sorry, Hill, feel free to add to that.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think you're underscoring the importance of really being responsible and not blowing your trimmings out into the street and making sure that the gutters are clear. We constantly are battling having to go out there and clear tree branches. So the model here is based on the assumption that the inlets are clear, and so if you have blockages, then you do have that elevated risk of.
Well, Hill, I think we do a really good job. Even the open ditches, okay, that's something that I can see. And I know that we grade all our open ditches, and then there's areas where we haven't gotten to them yet, and you can notice that they're filling where they're going across a culvert, maybe only 4 or 5 inches of that culvert's open. So we go in there and we grade it all out, but what we can't see is the stormwater sewer systems unless you put a TV in it and something like that. So I'm just wondering, I know we're talking about upsizing a tremendous amount of stormwater sewer systems in there. I just want to be confident first that we're also having, they're clear, and that they're moving the water that we need to be moved as they are now, as built.
So Jason was tapping me on the shoulder, and I'm sure he's going to mention it right now, but there is going to be a little bit of a mention of this in the report. But there is going to be a discussion of what we can be doing as far as the maintenance of our storm sewer systems in the future. That does involve doing some TVing of our storm sewers to make sure that we don't have blockages, don't have tree roots growing through the storm sewer system.
I think that's hugely important, Hill. I really do.
To add to that, I'm going to sound like a broken record. It's a policy decision. So right now, we are staffed with individuals and equipment to respond to requests for services. So Councilmember Griffon calls and says, I believe the storm sewer inlet in front of my house has a blockage. Can y'all check it out? So we have the staffing and equipment to go respond to that individual location. We do not TV 100% of the lines on an annual basis, let alone a 5-year increment. And even if we did have the ability to do it on a 2-year increment, for instance, by the time we got done after 2 years, it would already be blocked potentially again, because inevitably we can't control homeowners from doing things.
No, that was just an example, but I have never called the city
No, you haven't. No.
the culvert in front of my house. And as a matter of fact, it flows wonderfully. The one I have that goes over there.
But what I'm getting
It's a wonderful culvert.
What I'm getting at is it's a policy decision. In an ideal world, I would love to have the entire storm sewer system evaluated on an annual basis. But to present y'all with that cost and the taxpayer with that cost, it's pretty astronomical. So this council would need to say, hey, we want this looked at. We don't want to be reactionary, meaning we only respond to calls for services. We want to be actively out there looking for potential blockages. I'm going to need another 3 or 4 crews to do that.
The reason I bring that up, because the most efficacious way to move water through our creek systems right now, and that's completely debriefing
Desilting,
just desilting. I mean, everything cut back all the way, and that water is not getting blocked. The same concept, to my mind, is that you do it to the storm systems too. You make sure that they're all blown clear. Yeah, and before I'm ready to go spend, one of them was $128 million, and I don't even know how to wrap my head around that on our budget, on our city budget. But I think these stormwater systems are, this is the kind of study that we needed, because I was like, holy mackerel.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
I agree. We definitely need this. We're seeing that, a lot of the problem, correct me if I'm wrong, is undersized neighborhoods, and granted, when they built Forest Friendswood, I'm sure that they sized the sewer system the way that was, described, but now, years later, it's undersized, and one of our jobs, I think, as a city is to make sure that we're getting the water off of people's property into the creeks, and get that water to flowing. And so here we are faced with which neighborhood do you fix first, and if we could start all over, we'd definitely oversize the water sewer system, the storm sewer systems in there, but here we are. So.
Okay, good job.
I think we've made it to the last project. There'll be some just closeout slides after this, and this is, what's that?
And a test for us, right?
Yeah, do you remember every number?
Pop
that you
quiz,
see?
yeah.
Luckily, you have these in front of you, so you could reference
book.
it. So this is one that kind of is similar in what we've talked about in several other locations, and it's kind of something that maybe also touches on a larger scale channel improvement. And at times, something that's been effective in specific areas is shelving. We are seeing a lot of ponding and kind of even, repetitive structural flooding near the Poly Ranch Estates neighborhood. And so without going through and providing a full-on channel improvement in this area, how effective was shelving? And, kind of in the lower storm events or even throughout, it's not providing the most here. So this kind of points on to how is water getting through this area, and kind of can it be improved in a way that, is more of a channel improvement rather than only shelving. We see a lot of meandering of the creek, and so we're looking at maybe modifying this to see if, rather than that big whole channel improvement section, can we look at downstream of Chigger Creek, where there's a lot of bend, a lot of slowing of water, and that slowing of water then increases water surface elevations nearby. So this isn't the final form of this project, but it's an area that we're looking at as it is a place of high ponding, as it's downstream of Chigger Creek. And so we also, Hill had provided us some photos of the city, or from residents of the city, really close by to that project site of just a month ago when Tropical Storm Arthur, Depression Arthur happened, and we're already filling up quite a bit, or have a lot of the capacity already taken away in a storm that wasn't necessarily billed to be one of these major events. So we're still evaluating some of the adjustments and improvements to that shelving idea, and seeing what we could do with the available land, the nearby homes, or set back further in this area than some of the other locations along Trigger Creek. It provides potential opportunity to have some of that channel widening that we talked about, what an improvement actually is, to increase some of that capacity and try to reduce the water surface elevations there. So again, to show sort of spatially where we are in things across Chigger Creek, we looked at much of the area. We also, just to touch on Dickinson Bayou, a small portion of the city located in Dickinson. We looked at a few projects in there, mainly roadside ditch improvements, is what we predominantly saw on the southern side of the screen. But one of those were not one of the 15 that made it into the final list of 15. But it doesn't mean they aren't viable or left out. It was just We had 15 that we were finding scoring better on prioritization and included those in our presentation and in the report to come. So I'll hand it back to Jason with a couple more slides to let you know kind of where we are with the project. But thanks for hearing us out for quite a while.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to postpone the quiz for a little bit longer since we just got back from a long weekend. Only got 3 more slides to wrap up. I'm sure everyone's excited about that. So this is a slide from the previous presentation. I just wanted to bring it up to everyone's attention again. And so what we are doing, we're in the final process of prioritizing all these different projects, looking at costs, looking at metrics, looking at other factors. Some of these I'll go over in a minute are qualitative. Really trying to look at all the different parts of a project, how much it costs, what it does for flood risk reduction, how easy is it to get implemented, how can it be funded, what's the support of the community look like for it. Those are all really important aspects to a project moving forward. And so I just wanted to show this framework. This is the framework that we are using to prioritize the different projects. You can see there are 5 different criteria, each with an associated weighting factor. And the first 2 are quantitative, and so looking at roadway and structural flooding reductions. We talked about how both of those are really important throughout the city. In some areas, one is more important than the other and vice versa. But those 2 are really looking at numbers-wise, what is this alternative doing and how is it reducing flood risk? Project efficiency is looking at what are we getting benefit-wise versus the cost. So getting higher cost projects, if they don't bring equally higher benefits, gives you a lower project efficiency. Ease of implementation is this great category of a lot of different other things. But it's really important from an engineering and implementation perspective because it's looking at things like funding. Is this eligible for funding? Do we see a path where it can be phased? Is that going to be a challenge? What's the community impact? Are we going to be taking up a major thoroughfare and having to have that under construction for a year? Looking at mitigation, we talked a lot about mitigation. It is a huge driver in terms of the ability to implement projects as well as the cost of that implementation. And then right-of-way constraints. Obviously, projects that don't require additional right-of-way acquisition not only lowers the cost, but you get to that next step sooner. And so these are all important ease of implementation considerations that we wanted to look at for each of these projects. And then the last one, which we're still working with the city on, is understanding what some of the public impact and project support is for these different projects. Community support is critical for projects to move forward all the way to construction. So we want to make sure that we are taking into account feedback from stakeholders, from the city staff, from council, from all the important decision makers so that we have a plan that can move forward that's well supported and well thought out. Next steps, we are wrapping up the prioritization like I talked about, and we're working on getting benefit cost analysis complete. So we'll have benefit cost ratios for all these different projects. That's really important because that's an essential piece of information on funding applications. We're going to complete the project summary sheets. You may have seen those. Each project gets a one-pager, sort of all the key information, benefits, costs, description, potential considerations for design. That's a really helpful reference for y'all, for anyone who wants to look at these projects and understand what is Project 1 all about. So we will complete and finalize those. Those will be included in the final report as well. And then we're going to be finishing our implementation plan and submitting our complete draft report. The implementation plan looks at how do we fund, how do we phase, and how do we partner with other agencies to really move things from concept all the way to construction. We want these projects to be able to be moved forward so that the residents of the city can see the benefit, and we can really ultimately reduce risk and improve resilience in the city.
When do you think we'll start seeing these next steps from you?
Well, and the next steps, we're working on them right now, so I would imagine in the next, month or two, we should be able to wrap all these things up.
To add to those comments, I'm going to play fortune teller right now. You would have already picked up on the facts. Each of these projects represented a substantial cost relative to a fairly low benefit. So none of the BCAs are going to come back and say that these qualify for federal funds. Hence my comments that we're not going to find a lot of grants out there to do the storm sewer projects or our partnerships with other agencies to do the storm sewer projects. So the decision is going to boil down to whether or not this council believes that they're worthy enough to pursue bond dollars, which leads into our next discussion, and whether or not we should pursue those and then let the voters decide whether or not to support it. In addition to those comments, y'all had asked for a drainage story map. We are 95% complete, and we'll share it with you within the next week. But basically, a map of all these projects with their corresponding studies, whether the studies are complete. So for instance, in this instance, you're going to have draft slides. You're not going to have the complete study. But in others that will identify and highlight those benefits. So a resident that wants to go look at these projects and say, what does it actually mean for us? They'll get some tangible information.
So it will show what how many current structures are flooding, and then when you say it would save 3, we could gauge that to like, well, there are 4, 3 of them would be saved.
It won't show the current flooding because you can look at the floodplain map and determine that. It would tell you, based upon current conditions, these projects would then reduce 3 of those homes from that condition.
What they've included, but you said something earlier that you could give us the data that you based that off of based on current conditions, right? Isn't that what I understood?
Yeah, and that is presented in the report of a whole existing assessment with the same metrics of just the existing conditions area, but it would be on watershed-wide basis is how it's structured
Not
now, not on
the way
the
it's this
specific
way.
project area.
Say that again. I'm sorry, say that again. It's going to be watershed.
Yeah, so we split up the city into the watersheds presented here.
Okay.
Upper Clear, Lower Clear, and so the existing conditions results are going to be based on the entire watershed, whereas what you were seeing as a comparison here was showing just in the single instance or the project.
Okay. This just begs the question. The numbers here are so high. Okay, the cost here is so high. And then we talk about alternatives. I'm just wondering if we revisited tunneling at $90 million versus some of these things that are costing $128 million. And I know that we've had studies of 2 different possible tunneling projects. And the cost of the tunneling projects when we first saw them presented were astronomical. And then they came down to about $14 or $15 million a mile, I would say, and they were talking anywhere from 8 to 12 miles, getting from 2351 at the bridge to just past Clear Lake, where there could possibly be other structures that are putting in pump stations and that sort of thing. When I think of the cost-benefit analysis of a whole watershed, so I'm glad that you mentioned whole watershed. When I think of that, I have to go and think of possible tunneling as a alternative to some of the dollars that we're looking at here on a localized basis towards our taxpayers especially.
So real quick, Hill.
Go ahead, Mo.
Tunneling, the costs are still going to be anywhere from, if we're talking Clear Creek watershed, we're talking $500 million to $2 billion, depending on the specifics on the tunneling endeavor. It's not an alternative to doing these projects, though. The storm sewer systems within these projects are still going to be inundated and cause the ponding and still cause the potential flooded structures because they were so woefully inadequate during the time frame by which they were built. So the tunneling, we couldn't just do the tunneling and then the Analia issue be solved, is what I'm getting at.
If I diverted If I diverted watershed water from Clear Lake into the tunnel, then your outfalls where you were tunneling, where you were storm sewering your water to these watersheds, you would have the capacity to push it there without having to spend that dollar. Is a thought I'm having in my head. I'm not saying it's right because I'm not an engineer.
Conceptually, yes, but we would have to drop, sort of like the Norway model, the Denmark model, you would have to have barriers in place to drop the water surface elevation of Clear Lake sufficiently to allow for the additional water that's coming from the tunneling. And so the cost is not just the linear mile per, the cost per linear mile for the tunnel, it's the cost of putting in a barrier system to sufficiently drop the receiving lake. But you are,
That's a
yes, you are
discussion for another time.
correct. And
Okay, yeah, okay, when he brought up the whole picture, I was thinking the whole picture, and I understand all of these storm sewer systems. It's just, wow.
But I think, Robert, what you're seeing is a large portion of those dollars aren't just the storm sewer himself, but the mitigation for it. So you're talking about the mitigation side. If it was someplace else or happening upstream.
Yeah, part of it, yeah.
Then, you might be able to circumvent some of that stuff.
Right.
So, Mo, one of the questions I had for us is to think in the future is these storm sewer systems are going to fail at some point.
Correct.
Correct. So, what does our replacement look like? Does it replace in kind so we don't have to do the mitigation downstream?
No.
Or do we come to current standards and still have to bite that mitigation bullet?
So a great example of that would be Blackhawk. So as we go through and we did that roadway reconstruction, we put in larger storm sewer lines where we could effectively install one without causing any mitigation problems downstream. So yes, we did upsize the system to today's standards, but it's done at an astronomical cost as well. So it's not just the cost of replacing the pavement. Inevitably, we're going to have to do this for the entire city, but it will be done in, much like anything else, you eat the elephant one bite at a time and slowly. Sorry, Hill.
No, I was just going to say, for anybody who may not be familiar with what Councilman Griffon is talking about, the tunnel idea is something that came as a result of the first phase of the Lower Clear Creek and Dickinson Bayou watershed study. The second phase of that study has already kicked off. We had our kickoff study with League City last month. We have several partners in that. You may recall that the city has partnered to the tune of $1.25 million in that. We have our second meeting later on this week. So that is something that they will be exploring to see if that's even a viable option. Thank you. Yes.
All right, we made it to the last slide.
Sorry.
So, big picture takeaways. I wanted to kind of just touch on a few big takeaways from this study as we look at wrapping up our report in the next, 1 to 2 months, and really looking forward about what this project can do for the city in terms of long-term flood risk reduction and long-term planning. So taking a step back, we did 3 main things. One, we started with a quantitative assessment of risk. We looked at existing risk, we looked at future risk that was predicted to be happening around 2040. We looked at what areas have higher risk. Where is the structural flooding more prevalent? Where is the roadway flooding more prevalent? We looked at historical flood claims. So a lot of different information sources coming together to get an idea of where are these pockets of higher risk. We identified these high-risk areas, we identified problem areas, and understood, okay, what is driving this problem area? Is it the tailwater from Coward Creek? Is it undersized storm sewer systems? Kyle talked a lot about that in our last presentation. Understanding why flooding happens is critical to picking the right solution to address it. And then number 3, we looked at targeted drainage solutions, and we screened what were 50 different concepts down to a list of about 15 projects, all focused on hard drainage infrastructure improvements. Hill pointed out before that we are also including some discussion of an asset management and formal maintenance program in the report as well. This is something that's scalable, that the city doesn't really have defined right now, but could be of great value to the city going forward to understand how best to assess the current condition, looking at where things may need to be replaced, what needs to be replaced first, and then tying that into a formal maintenance program. So that will also be discussed. And really, kind of the ultimate big picture is we wanted to provide a range of solutions, some that are on the more lower cost, I won't say cheap, lower cost side, and some that are on the more expensive side, projects that the city can go and implement by themselves, as well as projects that require coordination. They require partnership with other agencies. And this is because we want the MDP to be a roadmap that the city can use to lay out how we want to reduce risk, where the funding priorities should be, and how we can really take all these ideas and then turn them into concrete benefits that the businesses and residents of the city feel. More work remains to be done. That second bullet is really important. We talked about mitigation several times, looking at ways to provide mitigation in other innovative ways, reducing that cost is going to be really important. A lot of these concepts will need to be further refined to get a better idea of exactly what the benefit will be and exactly what the cost will be once you move more into that detailed design phase. Further optimization, looking at that mitigation strategy is going to be really important. We wanted to include in this comprehensive MDP a projection of that, what we think it's going to take, because we don't want to move the problem somewhere else. And so this is a roadmap that's going to be setting up the city to say, okay, here is that top list. Here's our top 5 projects. Let's look at those in more detail and figure out what the roadmap is for those specifically. And I also just wanted to highlight the last bullet. As part of this project, we did go through and update the drainage criteria and provide a newer take, looking at some of the surrounding agencies, what criteria they have, and kind of standardizing that and updating it a little bit to more current times. That's going to help smart growth and development into the future. And then the last thing is the new risk web map. We created a project website for this project. We're actually in the process of creating a web-based story map that lets people kind of scroll through the project and see, why are we doing this project? What are we doing it for? And really, what are the recommendations at the end? And so that's going to be updated in the next 1 or 2 months with these recommendations that will give not just the city all this information to use, but allow residents and the public, where's my risk? What projects are going to be recommended? And be able to see that in a much more engaging and interactive way. And so that is where we are at right now, and we are excited to move forward to wrap things up. And if there's any other questions, we can take those right now.
Well, we look forward to the wrap-up, the final report, the benefit cost analysis. We'll definitely get some eyes on it, I'm sure. And so, thank you, Jason, Kyle. Any other questions?
Appreciate the time.
Thank you for.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for all that.
So, in case anybody wonders, anybody that walked in during that discussion, we've been talking about our master drainage plan. We're going to roll into the second topic of our work session topics. Council members, I'm not going to give you a break, but if you want to use the restroom during Murad's discussion, go ahead. I'm not going to hold you here, but I'm going to say that I want to keep going because we got, we're trying to get through this. We got a lot to cover. Hopefully you're quick.
I will be very quick. Unfortunately and fortunately, we didn't have the luxury of having the master drainage plan completed before the council appointed the bond advisory group. So the group of residents that met since November of last year and made the presentation to you last month spent quite a bit of time evaluating all the city's needs and all the critical infrastructure concerns that exist out there and formulated a recommendation to give to this body. At this last month's meeting, they proposed an overall bond package of roughly $50.9 million that had an estimated impact of the tax rate of 1 penny. assuming that values remain relatively flat and don't fluctuate. They broke it up into 4 categories: drainage, streets and transportation, facilities, and parks and rec. In addition to those projects that comprise the $50.9 million, there were some additional projects that the staff and the committee felt needed additional consideration, whether it's a rec center or some additional drainage improvements that weren't given to the bond committee in sufficient time, or they felt they were too big of an item by themselves to add to an overall bond package, so they gave you some alternatives. So the bond committee's recommendation, as I mentioned, was $50.9 million, having a 1 penny impact of the tax rate, existing home values of $500,000, about $41 a year. For new home values of $750,000, it's about $60 per year. We didn't want to just sit with the bond committee's thoughts and opinions. We said this last month, there was 35 members on that bond committee. Anybody that wanted to be on this committee was allowed to be on this committee. There was no vetting of individuals. But we wanted to know what the greater community thought of the project. So staff had started a survey of this bond committee's work, as well as a list of just general questions about quality of life and what projects that the community felt were important. And we sent those surveys out via social media, email blast, and a variety of other ways on our bulletin board so that folks in the community can take an opportunity to participate and give us their opinion. The online surveys were based and tied to GIS, so unique individual responses were identified. If folks wanted to make a comment as to what they thought wasn't covered in there, they were allowed to do so. And even if they tried to be anonymous, we know who they were because we have their address tied to the comments that were made. So that was a little comical. We connected the responses to the voter registration roll, so we know that folks that responded to the survey, whether or not they voted, which is a glaring statistic, and we'll come to it a little later. But why is that important? It doesn't matter what projects y'all put forth. If the folks that want to support these projects don't go to the polls and support them, the projects aren't going to be successful. So the survey results. We had 1,063 responses out of a community of 43,000 plus individuals. There's roughly 14,000 unique individual residential properties, so 1,000 responses, again, GIS based, out of those 14,000 is a pretty decent response rate. Thankfully, the responses came from all over the city. They weren't concentrated to an individual area. So the heat map on the right side of the screen shows you that they're indicated that pretty well covered the entire city. Of the respondents, 94% of them own their own home. 95% of them are registered to vote, and 66% of them did not vote in the last election. So you can discount, unless you get these individuals motivated to go to the polls, you can discount 66% of the responses are probably not of any value to us. Of over 46% of the respondents were 61 years and older. So kudos to the generation of older voters. They do show up and they do go to the polls. One of the responses that I'm very pleased with is over 93% of the responders were happy with the quality of life here in Friendswood. They said it was good or excellent. So whatever the magic recipe is it's working, and we need to continue that. The project propositions, as I mentioned earlier to you, were broken down into 4 categories: drainage, streets and transportation, parks, open space, and facilities. The scores are presented to you on the screen below. Which of the projects got the #1 priority? It's always going to be drainage. Heavy is on the heart of individuals that were impacted in Harvey, and obviously it will last with us for quite a while. Outside of drainage, the 22% for parks was the next big hitter, and then 20% for streets and transportation. With regard to the question, would you be willing to pay more in taxes to support categories that are important to you? 54% said yes, 45% said no, which isn't a drastic contrast between the two. It's close enough to 50-50, so I don't get a warm and fuzzy by that response. For those that responded yes, when they were then asked how much they would be willing to pay, 55 of the respondents said we'll pay more than 10 cents. Predominantly, it was anywhere from 1 to 3 cents. So 187 responders said 1 penny is sufficient. 211 said 2 to 3 pennies they'd be willing to go. Again, this doesn't mean anything unless these individuals show up to the polls. Drainage, as I mentioned earlier, got the number one priority over all the projects at $20.3 million. These are the same projects that Half and Associates just presented to you a few minutes ago. These are not the alternatives that will be discussed here in the next few slides. And I don't mean alternatives in lieu of these projects, I mean alternatives in addition to these projects. The results of the survey on the neighborhood-specific drainage improvements, 68% in favor, 31% not in favor. Broken down on an individual basis, the Chigger Creek Dig Out and Oak Bridge Crossing project got about 30% of the vote. Falcon Ridge, 22%, so on and so forth. I don't need to read those individually for you, but they're fairly even across the board. There's no one big support project. On streets and transportation, sidewalk improvements at $1 million, Bay Area Boulevard reconstruction, $6 million, and Murphy Lane and Stadium Lane listed there, totaling $11 million. Of the voters that were asked in this survey, would you support it? 68% said yes. 31% said they would not support $11 million worth of bonds for this effort. Sidewalks was the most popular at 55%, Bay Area next up at nearly 29%, and then Stadium Lane and Murphy Lane.
We're talking not only fixing sidewalks, but installing sidewalks where we need.
This is installing sidewalks where we don't have it, unless there's a glaring repair that needs to be made because
This is all new
This is all new sidewalks. Yes, sir.
Good answer.
City facilities, of the facilities that were presented by the bond committee in support of a recommendation, we had $5.9 million listed. Again, these aren't the alternatives, so the rec facility that was mentioned is a separate item. Of this, surprisingly, 46% said no, 54% yes, they would support it. And then here's a breakdown of the individual percentages and responses based upon that category. Parks and open space, there was $13.6 million of projects proposed. Again, there were some alternative projects in addition to these listed by the bond committee. 61, nearly 62% said yes, 38% said no, they would not support it. And then here's a breakdown. The Stevenson Park and both the parking lot improvements just on the other side of the ditch here at City Hall and the aquatics facility upgrades to the pool, those were the more popular items. Additional options. So the bond committee had highlighted some additional projects for council's consideration to include in a bond election. A 50-meter pool, adding $2 million, and some additional aquatic play equipment at the pool to give it a variety of uses to all ranges of individuals that visit the pool. A rec center of $47 million, and then drainage improvements in Forest Bend and Forest Creek neighborhoods totaling $32 million, in addition to the $20.3 million that was mentioned earlier. Of the responses received, 42% no on the Stevenson Park upgrades. So earlier I told you the Stevenson Park improvements were very popular. Expanding it to a 50-meter pool and adding additional aquatics equipment was not popular. And here's a breakdown of that response. On question number 2, as far as a rec center as a standalone proposition, 41% of folks said yes, and 59% said no. And here's a breakdown of that. And we broke it, not only did we specify a rec center, we also broke it down by location. On the drainage improvement alternatives, we had 34% say yes, 36% say no, and 29% surprisingly just said, didn't answer it. Which, again, much like voters that go to the polls, there are times they go to the polls and they don't vote on a number of items on the ballot. So good, bad, or indifferent, this is the reality we're in. Most requested bond items, we have a list of these broken down, and these are based upon individual comments that are submitted. We don't have to go through each of these, but all of this information is in the backup material, and we'll send it to council. I apologize, when we sent out the draft agenda packet 2 weekends ago, the survey wasn't complete, so we didn't have these results to present to y'all at that time. And then we go into some additional comments. For the sake of time, again, I won't go through all of these. So why is this important, or why are we up here again within less than a month to talk about it? Council had put together the bond advisory committee in hopes of potentially having a bond election in November. Now, their recommendation, of course, was to have a bond election in November, but it's still incumbent on this council to decide, one, are we having an election? And two, what are those items going to be? And three, how are we going to package them? Ideally, you would like to put everything to the voters and let them decide yea or nay what they want to support. But as you saw with the length of this own survey, some voters didn't want to answer all the questions because they thought it was too long. So you potentially run the risk, if you have too many items on there, that some things will just die for lack of interest. What I need from you this evening is some direction. We have the council retreat here in a couple of days, and I know a retreat's a misnomer. It's basically a glorified workshop. And then we have to start getting bond propositions to bond councils and to translators in anticipation of calling an election in August for November. So I need some feedback from y'all as to what projects you want to include and what you're thinking.
I'll give you my feedback, and I think we certainly need to have a bond election. I think what you said was perfect. I mean, we need to go to the voters. Voters are the ones paying the bill for this, and you know, that's incumbent on us. In fact, that's in our charter. You know, I mean, we to borrow money for these kinds of projects, we have to get voter approval. So I think it's smart for us to put a bond propositions on the ballot in November. Smart also to give the voters choices. Now, packaging, boy, that's a tough one because, you know, as we saw, $20.3 million for drainage doesn't really even scratch the surface on things that we need to do from our new drainage plan. But I think secondarily, when you say, okay, let's limit it to some number, and then which ones do you choose? That's going to be a tough one. It's like, how do we prioritize, you know, and we're going to have to come up with some prioritization and some way of packaging the drainage so that we can explain to voters, hey, if you approve this, this is what you're approving, you know, and if you live in Falcon Ridge, you might like this one. If you live in Forest and Friendswood, you might not like this, you know, it's going to be tough. Correct. But that's for us to work on, to hash out. So, yes, unless I'm hearing something crazy from my council members, I think we all have pretty much been leaning into a bond election here because that's how we have to fund these projects to move the city forward and continue with the great quality of life that we provide our residents.
Do you want to limit it to the recommendation of the bond advisory committee of the $50.9 million, or do you want to expand it, or how do you want to dissect it?
I think, frankly, I think that's a great proposal, but I think maybe expand it beyond that. You know, it's kind of like Chinese menu for the voters. I know when we put more things on there, and we know that some voters, obviously they can stomach a little more tax rate increase than others, but I think we always say, when we do these bonds, the discussion is, hey, we're going to pick 51 million because with that, we can definitely cover it with a 1 penny increase. And then our city staff does an amazing job, Rhonda, Andrew, you guys come out, Katina, big boss over there, you come over with these things and you say, hey, we can do this and here's your tax rate. And lo and behold, you know, we're figuring out, you know, with the magic of bond repayment rates and all that kind of stuff that, hey, we can do this for less than a penny, you know, so I don't know. I'm just kind of talking now, but go ahead, Trish. Cut me off.
No, I'm not trying to cut you off. You're making good points. So I think that when you approach a bond and you go out to ask people, I think you're right. People have choices, and you're not cramming anything. You're saying, what do you want? What do you not want? But I think in reality, we know that there are some things that are better paid for with bonds. There are infrastructure, there are deferred maintenance, big ticket items that people don't want their yearly tax rate increase to pay for big-ticket items, and it makes sense to put them on a bond because they will last for 50, 60 years, and you're going to pay for them for 20 or whatever whatever the financing is. So it makes sense. And we have some of those infrastructure needs that make sense to go out to the community and say, these are the things that we need to keep the quality of life in our city, to have clean water, to whatever it might be. Water's not a good example, but whatever it might be. And to go and ask them for that and tell them how much it would cost to do that. I think that there's a difference between needs and wants. And, you know, I lean personally to some of the wants because I love this community. I love where it's going, and that's the vision. I love the quality of life in this community. I don't know if right now is a bond-friendly time. Some people, unfortunately, will just vote no because you're asking them for money that they don't think you really need. And so then the other things that you really need suffer. So I don't know that I don't know. I'm open to it because I do believe that people have choices and you can say yes to some and no to others. And so put it on there. But I do think too that when you have a bond committee, they did a fabulous job. And I went to some of the committee meetings and the presentation was excellent. But you have, or I think anyway, that we have to realize that everybody who served on that is interested in having one, okay? Everybody who served on that. They wouldn't get on there if they didn't want to have bonds, or they didn't want to improve something, or they didn't recognize the need. So I think they already go on. So you're going to come back with, from a committee, about a bond ad hoc committee, they're going to come back just like they did with the school system, like any other bond I've been involved in. They get educated, they go on the tours, they see behind the scenes, they get the finances, and they see the picture of why we would want this. But the general public doesn't. So you've got to have this huge education piece to tell everybody else. And we had 66% of the people that responded to this didn't even vote in the last election at a time when it is the easiest in history to vote. The easiest in my life to vote. You have 2 weeks. You don't even have to have a reason. You can go for 2 weeks and vote in a precinct you don't even live in, and they'll give you your ballot. And they're open on weekends. I mean, it makes it so easy, and yet we still have less than 30% or less than 35% of any neighborhood in the city that are voting. So it's not even one area that's not voting, it's everybody. Nobody's voting. So I don't know what the answer is. I just think that we need to consider all of those things. That, yes, there's a lot, why not ask for everything that the bond committee put down? They are the most educated of the community now of what the needs are, but they're also the most supportive and interested. And so are there things that we really need? Are there things that we really need that we want this community to vote for? And so I don't know, maybe that's how we approach this. I just think that's, for us to think about.
So just anecdotally and sort of qualifying it as opposed to quantifying it, if 94% of the community is happy with the quality of life, of those projects presented, if they were to fail, what would that do to the quality of life? So for instance, we put Bay Area Boulevard on there because over the last 5 years, we've had to shut down the road in emergency situations. I don't mean during flood events. I mean, there were sections of concrete that had separated a good 6 or 8 inches in a matter of a weekend that we had to shut down the roadway and reduce traffic. If you shut down that entire roadway because we're having larger repair needs, then that's going to drastically impact the quality of life for everybody in that region from a traffic standpoint.
And that's what I mean. We know that more than the general public.
Correct.
Because they're busy running their own lives, not running the city.
The folks that use our parks are tickled pink by how great the facilities are, how clean they are, well maintained, and the options that are out there, the folks that participate in the programs. Again, that leads to the quality of life issues. when we're unable to provide that service to them, that's when that starts to suffer.
That's
So
right.
I can't give you all the answers to which projects to put on there. If I were voting alongside y'all, I would say put all of them on there and let the voters decide, because you can't get more democratic than that. But I don't, honestly, in this market politically, I don't think that bonds are going to be successful. And it's not a knock on the work of the Bond Advisory Committee. It's not a knock on our staff. Our staff is amazing. It's just the reality that we live in.
And that's, I agree with Mike wholeheartedly. It's democratic. Let them pick. We're intelligent people. They shouldn't be insulted. But I also think psychologically, in seeing what's happened, maybe we hone in on the things we know we have to have. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
Does a failed bond package, whatever it may be, create more difficulty the next time around when you bring it to the voters? And I'm just thinking, we got school bonds coming up again in November, correct?
Oh, I don't know.
Another round of them?
I don't know. I haven't heard that.
No, we're done?
Heard that.
Okay. So there won't be any other competing bond issues on the ballot for the local resident, correct?
As far as we know, but until August comes and goes and nobody else puts something on the ballot. Yes, sir.
One thought, and one of the things, and I'm the new guy, but I've been looking at ways to go about this, and I see packaging and selecting certain things to put in these various packages. But for the, and I agree, the voters should be the ones that decide, but, and again, attention span, or, you know, whatever you want to call it, when you have a long list of things that people need to vote on and explanations that go with each one of them, it can be a little difficult to get through, but it's important. And I think standalone issues on every item, whatever they may be, should be the way they're presented, with the proper backup and disclosure and whatever needs to be there, because that gives the most transparency on each issue. That's my opinion. Whether I'm for the issue or not, it's really not up to me. Again, I can vote on whether or not we present it, but I think it's fair to the voters to give them the opportunity to make the decision. But I would like to see it presented as standalone issues on every item.
So regardless of drainage and parks, you want every single individual project to be a standalone
20 of
proposition?
them, or if it's 50 of them.
Okay.
Yes, that would be my preference.
And I need to hear from all of you guys so that we know what we're doing. And if I can get a general consensus, then we can start formulating a bond program.
Well, Mo, I have to agree with you. I think the appetite for bonds out there is not very good right now. I saw what happened with the FISD bonds, putting everything out there, and then one of the things that I considered the most important need failed. And we have received a report from Rhonda and Katina, and we know that in 2 years, that we're going to have debt service capacity coming our way, because the 2015 bonds, the 2016 bonds, and the 2017 bonds are rolling off of our debt service. And that's going to save us about anywhere from, based on what Katina told me earlier today, about we're going to go from around 8 million to around 4.3 million. And if we're talking about another $4.3 million worth of debt service, what I would consider doing is not trying to push this bond on people right now and allow us the opportunity to allow these bonds to roll off. And in my opinion, and it's different from some of the things that I've heard here, this is, if we are going to do a bond, and this is the perfect time ever, since I've been here in this is my 9th year, to see the activity center built. If we have $50 million worth of capacity for a 1-cent increase, then I would like to consider, everyone to consider, the activity center downtown. And I've heard some crazy things on the street that we want 300 parking lots, so we can't build a activity center downtown. To me, that's I don't even know what kind of think that comes from. But for me, in the commercial world, in the private sector, and Michael could probably speak to this better, but I've spoken to a lot of developers, including the land purchase, you're looking at about $216 a square foot. That's buying the property and putting the shell up. It costs another $40 to $50 a square foot to put the infrastructure together inside of the building. And if we wanted to build a 30,000 square foot building in the downtown district, which helped the downtown district, then you would be looking at about $264 a square foot if you didn't own the land. But we own the land downtown. And let's just say, because it's not the private sector, and you've told me a lot of times what happens with the public sector is the intensity in which these things have to be built. It's public, it's got to be more. Let's say there's $300 a square foot. So it's $300 a square foot times a 30,000 square foot building is $9 million bucks. Let's put one thing on the item, the one thing that we need, and we've needed it ever since the police station left downtown and came out to 528. The library there was built in 1978. It's falling apart. It's falling down. And I think that we can go to them and say, we have one item. In 2 years, 3 years, we are going to have $4 million worth of debt service capacity to put these bonds out here. But right now, I can build you a $9 million building without raising you a penny. Or if I look on here, maybe 0.001 cent, and just put one item on there. And if everybody says, no, we don't want that one building, one chance we finally get to get an activity center, and it won't cost you anything to get it, then I don't know what the people of Friendswood want. But I know one thing, that in my heart I know that this isn't really a very good time to be asking for bonds. But if you tell them we can build this building for $9 million, a 30,000 square foot, and let's go ahead, and I did ask Mike about some of the horizontal stuff. Let's go ahead and say it's 12 million and do the parking and take in the Cub Scouts over there. You have a facility now downtown that's not going to cost, what do they have on here, $37 million for a rec center? $47 million for a rec center. That number to me is just like, let's just pick a number out of the sky. Well, they might have come up with that because we wanted 300 parking spots, and that's why we can't build it down there. That's why we got to go out to Lundy Lane and build it on the 27 acres out there. Well, we don't really need anything out there on 528, not for our senior citizens and not for the activity center. And let me just say this, we don't have a facility that we can boat at. There is going to be a requirement by the state of Texas that says you have to have a place provided by the city that you can boat at. Let's do one thing. Let's spend $9 million on it, get you a 30,000 square foot building, a beautiful facility that will house our people, that will house our senior activity centers. We have over 1,200 people rolling through the senior activity, the old library over there every month. And I would say, let's hold off on all of this other stuff until our debt service capacity, we're going to get $4 million in 2030. You asked for my recommendation, and that's my recommendation.
I appreciate that, but.
I wanted to give a little bit of information on the debt service capacity. The schedule that we presented last month was including if we had issued, or if we were to do a bond election and it passed, we would issue debt. That would take us to roughly $8 million on
Right.
debt service annually.
Right.
Our current debt service is 6.5 million,
Mm-hmm.
and by 2032, we'll roll off the bond issuance
20,
that you had
20, yeah, you showed me that, and it'll be 4 point what?
4.3.
4.3 million. Okay, so now we're looking at $8.7 million if we go ahead and pass $54 million in bonds.
50.9.
50.9, or in 2031, we're going to have all that debt roll off, and we're going to have $4.3 million of debt service. Then we have the capacity, that's what it is.
We'd go from
If we don't
6.5
eat-
to 4.3.
That's what I just said.
So we'd have 2 million, not 4.
So.
We'd have 2 million, not
You
more.
reduce it 2 million.
We would, our current.
Yeah,
The
we-
8 million, from 8 million to 4.
Our debt service will,
if we were to
our debt service will be $4.3 million.
in-
Okay.
By 2032. Yes.
I'm not selling the 50 million. Okay, y'all are selling the 50 million, and it's gonna be $8.7 million if we sell the 50 million. Right. Okay, I'm saying let's not sell the 50 million. Let's not. And let's have that go to $4.3 million, and let's build a building down there and not raise any taxes.
Now,
I think at the same time, you know, we can't wait 3, 4 years to fix Bay Area Boulevard, sidewalks that we need, drainage. We're, you know, I mean, $20.3 million looks like a pittance compared to what we're talking about, you know, in the previous discussion. So I don't think we can wait. I think, and Robert, I think we just have to trust voters at some point, and you tell them what you need, and yeah, I'm with you. I say put that event center on there and let them have a say at that, and package it in such a way that it's not $47 million. I don't know.
We just got a master drainage plan that was presented to us, and the issues that were brought up in that master drainage plan have been a problem in the city for over 35 years. That did not just show up today, okay? Now, we have a master plan that we've been working on, and the problems that we have in the master plan did not just show up today. And it's not like, oh, we've got these plans. Let's turn around, spend $50 million and try to fix it now. Let's prioritize it. If I was going to do another facility, I would do the $4 million on the fire department expansion, because this city is going to have to consider, in not too distant future, onboarding personnel, active duty personnel firefighters. And then that's going to cost money. So where do you want to go? You want to throw all this in there and then have virtually none of it pass?
I don't know how you say that. I don't know
Okay.
how you just
The most, okay,
predict
I'm
what
just,
the voters are going to do.
I'm just,
give them the
I have a
option.
feeling. I just have a feeling.
Well, you got to give them the option. I don't.
Okay, y'all do whatever you want. I'll vote against putting everything on there. Yes, sir. And that's okay,
Really don't-
because I don't really have a problem with that.
Mayor, may I respond to at least one thing? On the $9 million, we'll put whatever amount y'all want to put on there. I just want to remind this council that in October 2024, we had architects present the projects, both for the library as well as the rec center, trained professionals that said this facility is going to cost you 36 to 47 million. The comparable facilities in Deer Park cost $30+ million. So we can do a facility for 9 million, but it won't be what was presented in that concept.
I just
So-
gave you the cost basis in the private sector, or what they're building out at the city center. You know, and it's $216 a square foot for the shell, and another 45 to 60 at the most for the punch out. Now you pick how many square feet you want and get a private sector person to build it instead of RFQ, and get some federal government people come in here and build it for 30 million.
Legally, I cannot have a set of plans designed and then go tell somebody in the private sector, come build it for me for 9 million. I have to bid it. So I can't say if Michael Ross firm can do it for 9, I can't ask Michael Ross to do it. He has to go out and bid it.
I understand that, but I'm just telling you.
He couldn't do it because it's a conflict of interest. Yeah.
I know what the Joyner,
Yes, sir.
what the Joyner bid was, and I know that was several years ago, but it was 9 million.
Yes, sir.
And I remember the Joyner report. And then I think that if we go out for bids and y'all design it for the parking spaces that we have over at the downtown district, we can come in under $37 million. And again, that's my opinion. I don't think that throwing everything into a bond election is going to go. I think we're already being called tone deaf.
Yes, sir.
Y'all want to talk about affordability right now in America and in the city right now in our tax dollars? People are screaming right now over their appraisals. People are upset because they can't afford the water that we're charging them. They can't afford the utilities that we're charging them. They can't afford the taxes that we're charging them. And then we're going to turn around and put $50 million on their back and say it's only going to cost you a penny more. And then what we do is we come together and say, oh, this is the average home in here. It's going to cost you $41. We do that on every one of these issues. And I'm just telling you, the people out there are sick of it. And they are to the point where they're taxed too much. and they've got lives to lead. They have situations where inflation's still at 4%. They're trying to feed their families, and I think we're totally tone deaf if we step up here and say, okay, let's just put everything up there, and let's put it on a bond election. And if you don't want it, don't go for it.
If I could add to that, what Katina talked about with, and you had brought up last month with the retirement of the 15, 16, and 17 bonds, the interest in shrinking rate, as opposed to being 11.4 as it is now, if we did nothing, if no bond passed, and we retired those debts in 3 or 4 years, those bonds, what would our interest in shrinking rate?
It would be about 9 cents, 9.5.
It would only go down 3 cents?
Yes, sir.
It depends on value.
But-
So
right.
the interest in sinking tax rate is a function of value. And so as we get new properties that are frozen, when you exceed 65, or other properties come off the rolls as exempt properties, that impacts the value as well. So we can't give you an exact dollar figure or rate 2 years in advance because we don't know what the values are going to be 2 years from now. We can give you a guesstimate.
Estimated.
But we can tell you the tangible dollar amount, which, what Katina answered Councilmember Griffin's question. We're going from 6.5 million to 4.3 million. We can tell you that. That's our payment obligation to the investors.
But don't we know what the interest rate is on that?
We know what no, you're talking interest rates on bonds. I'm talking our
The tax
interest in
rate.
sinking rate on our tax rate. So we know,
It's different.
two different things. So I can't, our 11 cents is the component of our tax rate that pays debt service. It's not the interest rate that we agreed to pay on the bond that we borrowed.
Yeah, we don't know if it's a 4 1/4 or 6, or, that's a huge difference.
So I'm going to throw a couple of things out there that I'm going to take Robert's idea and supersize it.
That's what the workshop's for.
I would love to see us own that entire block. I would love to see us reach out, purchase the front end of the block that we own the back end of right now, where City Hall used to be, and sell off where the library is right now, and then have that entire block and have a community center. I think a rec center belongs out on Lundy Lane. I think we need a community center in the middle of town. I also have a problem with taking, because we have 3/8 of a cent that's coming in for our streets. And I know y'all told me there's enough money there to take care of Bay Area Boulevard, if that's what we really want to do. I'd rather not pay interest on a bond when we're already collecting dollars for street maintenance. And that one's a street maintenance, it's not a new road. And as you talked about, if we shut the whole thing down for a long period of time, our citizens are going to be unhappy. So do a phased approach. So those are the two things that I would like to throw out there. I also agree that right now, I'm not sure the timing is good for a bond, because after what happened on the FISD side twice, I think people right now are just, they don't want to spend any more money. They are tired of spending money. And so if we throw anything out there, I think we throw it out there. We try to package it so that they can pick and choose what they would like to do. But I don't really have high hopes that any of it's going to pass. And I have worked on bond elections for a number of years, both school and city. And to this point, we've had a lot of volunteers working this and a lot of staff time working this. But there's going to be a lot more time that's going to be needed in order to have a bond election, whether it's successful or not. And that's going to impact volunteers and staff again. So I think we need to really seriously consider whether or not we think that this, if it goes out there, then it being successful, because I'm very much afraid that it will not be successful. I don't think the appetite is out there of our citizens. I mean, just what you showed, the people who answer the survey, over half of them don't vote. And then if you look at the results that you got, they said drainage was number 1, but then when it came into what their highest priorities were, drainage was like number 3. So it's all over the map right now, no pun intended there. So I'm really struggling with where I would fall on this, whether I would support going out or I would not support going out. But I would like to buy that property and flop the library, flip-flop
I
the
just
library.
want to say, I agree with Sally, too, that it should be a community center and not a rec center. It should be a community center. I agree with you completely on that.
And I don't discount any of the comments that are made. I just want to make sure that the expectations are properly set. So $9 million can build a community center. The thing that Joyner did back in 2019 was a community center. It wasn't a rec center. So that's, I want to make sure when we're talking apples to apples versus apples to oranges. So if we want to set aside $9 million, we could do a $9 million facility.
I'm not setting it aside. Why don't you show me? Why don't you show us the $37 million build?
I did. It was in the backup material for October.
I'm looking at that right now, and that's a big shell building with a basketball court in the bottom of it, and that.
Offices and weight room facilities and.
And that's
breakout meeting rooms,
$37 million. Who bid that? Where did we get that?
We paid an architecture firm. This council approved a contract with PGAL to do a programming and conceptual planning for the library expansion as well as the rec center. And say they presented their findings to this council in October of 2024, and it was 37 million to 46 million, depending on when you go out and what inflation ends up doing. If we're just talking a rec center, which what Joyner was talking, or a community center is what Joyner was talking about in 2019, that was $9 million. And yes, we can do something like that, but it wouldn't be a full-scale rec center. I think
it should be a community center downtown.
Yes, sir.
And then someday in the future, when you want to build a sports complex and rec center, then go out there on the 27 acres.
Yes, sir.
But currently, I think we need to say yea or nay to a bond election. And then
Based on that, how do y'all want it broken
based
up?
on that, how do we refine that? And I'm hearing a few people saying yes, a bond election. I'm hearing myself say that. And it's just a matter of packaging and which projects are we put on there. If you keep pointing at the school district, well, they went out for a bond election, it failed. They went out for a bond election again, and 3 of the things passed. So, maybe we don't get it, and we're not as successful this time, but we're not going to be successful if we don't ask. I know that, so. And the streets, Sally, I agree, we got a lot of money for streets, but that's a big ticket item, that Bay Area Boulevard, that would suck more than a year's worth of our street maintenance funds right and by itself. So we would have to put every other street on the shelf for a while and stop working on streets until.
You've got a nice little cushion sitting there.
That's obligated to the Blackhawk Boulevard project. So our half of the responsible party for the contract that we just executed is the rest of that cushion.
How much is unencumbered?
Calculate.
I'll get you all the number.
I know there's an annual amount that comes in, and
2.7.
an amount that's unencumbered. And we talked about doing a phased approach. So I don't think my idea is too far-fetched, I'll just say it.
Yes, ma'am.
Murad,
Yes, sir.
may I? What are the timing constraints that we have if you want to try to put a bond on the 20,
have to approve it in August.
by this? So we have to have this approved by council by August.
The August council meeting, correct.
Okay.
But I will caveat it. We have to have bond council draft the propositions, because the propositions aren't just whatever we feel like writing. They're prescribed by state law, so they have to be prescribed in such a manner that complies with state law. And then those propositions have to be translated into different languages in order to qualify. So, and that takes bond council a little time.
So what do you think you've heard tonight from council so far? I mean, you haven't heard me speak, but I think you've heard quite a bit, so.
I've heard quite a bit. Much like dealing with the committee of 35 residents, amongst the discussion, there's a lot of things that are lost in translation, and it's not intentional. So I meant what I said. I want to make sure that we temper expectations appropriately. I will do whatever this council collectively decides, and I will implement the crap out of it. But I need to know exactly what I'm
What it
building.
is?
What it is.
Yes, and I think collectively you've heard, we don't know what it is. So I'm not sure how we could convey to you,
Correct.
other than we have a lot of good ideas, in my opinion, and we've also had, Trish hit it nail on the head, wants and needs, and we need to go look at the needs first and foremost and put those as a priority if we're going to do anything along this line. And then the wants, we can come back. But right now, if we're rushing to get this done by this year and there's needs, we need to stop looking at the wants and look at the needs first, in my opinion. It doesn't mean we can't come back and revisit the wants and how they benefit the community, but that takes a broader focus and more support, I would say. The needs are pretty obvious at times. I think generally speaking, we, because of your input and the engineers and everybody that we get, give us the needs. You know, we understand those well because that's what we do day to day, or you do day to day, and you can convey them to us. The wants, which is what would require citizen input, and the vote is something that would have to be very well orchestrated to get to those wants. And I think you couldn't put wants on this list right now if you wanted to, my opinion.
Well, we do have the luxury or the benefit of having a meeting 2 days from now.
Yes.
And this is one of the topics that we want to have further discussion. I did have enough input from y'all that there's a general consensus, and I haven't heard from Councilmember Ellisor, but that there is an appetite for a bond election, but what that entails is undecided at this point. So let's have a further discussion 2 days from now. There's some other items on the agenda, if that's okay with the mayor.
I agree.
Sorry,
John?
Councilmember Ellisor.
Morad, I agree that we need to hone in on what the most important issues are, the most important needs, and focus on those, whether it be one or several. But I agree that the temperature for a bond, a broad base, is not good.
Yes, sir.
Do we have it as an action item Wednesday so we can vote on it?
We do not, but we can have a special council meeting later in July if necessary. But if I can get the consensus from council that y'all have something that I know what it is, we can start working with an attorney to draft the language so that we're not wasting any time.
Can you tell us Wednesday what the absolute needs are that we could not afford if we didn't have a bond?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, to Sally's point, I mean, I think, you know, if we can afford the Black Hawk improvements out of operations, then we need to look at that, because it is a need, but at the same time, we can't get it to put us in an operational deficit, so.
And you've heard this phrase before by General Hampton. Sometimes we're a victim of our own success. So when staff is able to multiply projects, we did it with Black Hawk Boulevard, we did it with the drainage bond projects in 2019, an expectation is set that you can do that on every scenario, and it's not always the case. And so I want to make sure that whatever y'all ask us to do is appropriately.
It's our bill.
Yes.
Yes, effectively.
Yep.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yes, ma'am.
About the school district, though? You know, I think that the school district, but I think the city is not guilty of this, but we do the same thing. We can make things look good, and we can make them last, and we do good maintenance. And sometimes people don't see the real need, which is the case at Westwood, okay? They don't see the infrastructure, what's behind, what's happening in the roofs, what's happening in the walls. They don't see that kind of thing because they do a good job of maintaining and making it look good. I think the city does the same thing. So that's why I said we need to know from y'all what are the real critical needs.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to say we're going to recess for 15 minutes because there's people in the room that came in at 5:30 expecting a council meeting to start, and I'm sorry our work session took a better part of 3 hours. So
I think you won.
I'm going to give people 15 minutes to recess, come back. We're going to reconvene at 6:30.
Sounds good.
Everybody? It is 6:30.
To
City Secretary.
John needs, oh, Murad can probably do it. Oh, maybe I'm getting there. He lost his agenda. Sorry. The home screen, yeah.
Never get out.
Okay, I am reconvening the open meeting of the Friendswood City Council. We now move on to item 8A, tax increment reinvestment zones, public improvement districts. 8A is to receive an overview of tax increment reinvestment zones and public improvement districts, including information concerning the reinvestment zone numbers 1 and 2, City of Friendswood and Friendswood City Center Public Improvement District, presented by Jonathan Frells and Mary Buzak with Bracewell.
So, Mayor, as Jonathan and Mary are getting up to the podium, you may recall we created the tax increment reinvestment zone a little over 2 years ago in 2024, if I'm correct. There's been some change to City Council since that time period, and there's always a number of activities that are required as part of the TERS and the PIDs over the lifetime of both of those institutions. As such, we wanted to give a general overview of what they are and what they can do and what they cannot do for the benefit of council.
Great idea.
Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I've got Mary Buzak here with me. I'm Jonathan Frells. We're both with Bracewell. We represent you in connection with your public improvement districts and your tax increment reinvestment zones. We've got a presentation here tonight. It gives you a lot of information. I'm not going to go through it page by page. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys may have. I'll flip through it relatively quickly, but I'm really here to answer your questions that you may have. And hopefully this can serve as good background information for you. I know a lot of people probably want to see the soccer match in about an hour. So we'll try to move through. So public improvement districts, just generally, they are an area. They're a defined area within the city or the city's ETJ. So they are not really a separate political subdivision, but they are a defined area within the city. They're used as an economic development tool, and they are really there to levy assessments in order to build the public infrastructure that you are attempting to obtain through the use of those facilities. They're done by petition, so the landowners have to petition the city for the creation of a public improvement district, and then there's a hearing and creation process that goes along after that. But I think the important point for us is that these are done at the request of the property owners that will be paying the assessments that are associated with it. So PID, what are PID assessments used for? You're assessing to pay for one of two things. One, debt service, usually on tax-exempt bonds that are issued to fund public infrastructure. So when we're talking about PID improvements and what they can be used to pay for, it is for public infrastructure that's ultimately going to be owned by the city. Or amounts owed under a reimbursement agreement. So there are kind of two different ways you can go about it. One of them is to reimburse a developer over time, and the other is to issue debt where you're paying for that infrastructure in the acquisition. Over time, the PID also pays for the administration because there are annual things that go on with doing a PID. In fact, tonight, you're doing an updated service and assessment plan that you'll have presented to you as well, and that's an annual obligation. And you have an assessment consultant that works with you on taking care of those types of things, and so that's something that annually you deal with and you pay for. And so you see that on a regular basis. So once you have a PID, until the public improvements are fully paid off and it goes away, you'll have annual activities that you have to take place in order to deal with that. So assessments, the assessments are interesting. So when you do a PID, unlike ad valorem taxes, you're paying for them with assessments. And the assessments are allocated among properties based on the special benefit that's conferred to the individual properties that are there. And once you levy those assessments, they're in a specific amount. They don't increase as home values increase. They terminate once those specific amounts have been paid in full. And you've even got opportunities. Not many people take advantage of it, but you've got opportunities for people to pay those assessments in full if they don't want to pay them annually over the life of the TERS. So over the life of the PID. Assessments are a lien that run with the land, so they're like taxes from that standpoint. You do have the obligation, and it runs with the land to whoever the owner of the land is. Again, they're like taxes. They're collected kind of in the same way. They're billed at the same time as property taxes. They're delinquent at the beginning of the year and incur penalties and interest if you don't pay them. The reason why you utilize a PID, it's an economic development tool. It's incentive to pursue development that otherwise wouldn't happen for the most part. In your case, if you look at City Center, you'd had multiple failed development attempts on that property, and this was something that could be utilized to assist with that. They're often used for urban infill projects. That's one of the main ways you see it. A lot of times cities look at it and say, we don't want to have another municipal utility district or another governmental body inside of our boundaries. We would rather have something that we as the city can control and oversee that isn't going to be here forever afterwards, that isn't going to have another tax that they levy on top of that. We want to find a way to get in and out and do the projects that we ultimately want to do. So that's the way they're utilized. The other way that they're utilized, that they're really helpful, is they can help you have more control. The legislature has really limited what cities can control as it goes along with developments. When you're dealing with a development agreement, you can get people to contractually agree to do additional things when you're asking them when they're asking you for incentives. And so you can do design, architecture, building materials that exceed your subdivision requirements. You can look at lot and residential unit sizes that align with what you guys ultimately want to do. So there are a lot of important things that you can do that you otherwise can't do through state law, that through an agreement you have the opportunity to do. And so this is a tool that assists the city in doing that. They can also really help accelerate your construction of improvements of your comprehensive plan, thoroughfare plan, parks plan. So again, those are other things that they can really be a good incentive for helping you achieve those items. Three different types of PIDs that you can do. Some of them are pay-as-you-go. We talked about reimbursements. A pay-as-you-go PID would reimburse as items come through. A reimbursement bond would be you issue debt once the infrastructure is already in, and then you have construction bonds, which allow for issuance of upfront bonds for the construction of infrastructure. And sometimes it can be a combination of the two and how it works out. These are the really important parts that I wanted to talk to you about. One, PID debt is non-recourse to the city. It's payable solely from those assessments. Bondholders can't demand payment from taxes. They can't demand payment from sales taxes. Bonds or reimbursement agreements are backed solely by those special assessments that are out there. Issuance of PID debt does not reduce the city's other bonding capacity. I know y'all had a lot of discussion about that tonight, so that's also important. The city gets to keep its ad valorem tax and sales tax revenues inside of a PID. You may have a tax increment reinvestment zone. Mary will talk about that in a minute, but a PID does not pick up or take away any of your sales tax or ad valorem taxes. It does count against your bank qualified limit, but that's typically not an issue for you guys. And then the bonds, again, there is a small universe of buyers that really looks at these types of things based on the fact that they are based on special assessments. Again, the bonds are issued by the city, and the city's name is on the bonds, but they are payable solely from those special assessments. If you were to ever have a default on PID debt, it's payable, again, the PID debt is payable solely from the annual installments or payments that are there. It's not likely to be reflected in the city's credit rating because, again, it's a non-recourse special assessment debt, but you could have a situation if you had a default where the city's name is on some bonds that did default, so there's a little headline risk that's associated with it. A default would really only happen if property owners is not paying their assessments, but you've got a lot of safeguards that are built into the documents. You've got reserve funds that are built in. The land that the improvements are on also are there because you can foreclose upon that land. And in fact, if the debt is issued and somebody didn't pay, you have an obligation as the city to foreclose upon that land in order to produce the funds necessary to pay it. So ultimately, I think that the key point is you're going to get in a PID, because of the way they're structured, you're going to get the funding up front to put the infrastructure in that you expect. You may not always get all the development, but you'll get the infrastructure that you're issuing for. And so that's a really important part there. Again, the way y'all work this, all your costs associated with PIDs are paid by the developer or paid from assessments so that those are not paid out of general city funds. And then Mary will quickly talk about tax increment reinvestment zones.
So like PIDs, the TERS is another economic development tool that is also essentially a geographic overlay over an area within the city. And so there are a few steps that you have to follow under the state law in order to create a TERS. And I won't read through all of these, but I will let you know that the city council has actually acted in the last couple of years to create two TERSs, TERS 1, which is city center, and then TERS 2, which involves various different developments in a different area of the city. And so both of those are now in existence, increments being generated. And, you know, at least on the city center side, there's projects underway, as well as in TERS 2, Castle Biosciences is working on its project. And just the general way that TERSs work, it is not a separate tax. It is not a difference in tax. If you live in a TERS or you don't, you are paying the same property tax to the same taxing units, and the taxing units can decide whether they're participating in the TERS or not, and how much of their increment is going back into the TERS for TERS projects versus being retained. And so in the case of TERS 1, the city participates at 70%, which means that it holds a portion of its increment for general fund purposes, and the rest of it is then placed into the TERS fund for use for TERS number 1 projects and reimbursable expenses. And TERS number 2, the city participates at 100%. So all of the city's increment that it collects above the base year value of the property in that TERS is invested back into the zone. So I've covered most of this slide already, but generally speaking, just so you guys know, especially for the newer council members, for TERS 1 and TERS 2, you are wearing the hats of the board members as well as your city council member hats. So occasionally, we will have joint meetings or TERS-specific meetings where we will ask you, as the board of directors of the TERS, to approve different actions related to the TERS. And we've done that before when we were setting up the project plans for both of these TERSs, as well as the development agreements that the city and the TERS have entered into. And those are just the financing mechanisms for the city to be able to use the money to reimburse developers that are executing on public improvements and other project costs that are eligible for reimbursement based on their fulfillment of various different conditions that they must satisfy in order to receive reimbursement. And one of the things that is useful, particularly in the city of Friendswood with City Center PID and TERS, is that when you have an overlay of a PID and a TERS over the same geographic area, you have the opportunity to utilize TERS revenues in order to offset the PID debt that you've issued. And so that is part of your financing plan for TERS number 1. And that's the extent of our presentation. We ran through it pretty quickly, just to give you guys a very high-level view, but we're here to answer any more specific questions, provide any more information that you need. Thank you.
I will. I do have a couple of questions, if I may.
Go ahead.
At what point in the development is it determined exactly how much the TERS funds will be paying of the total PID bond debt?
Yeah, so that is part of the discussions when we're looking at the development agreement. A big part, we think it's really important, and in discussions with the city, is to run some of that financial analysis up front to see what the city can afford ultimately and what fits into the city's best long-term plan. So as part of the development agreement, that gets structured. There are a couple of different pieces. So in the development agreement, you have a tax stack that is the maximum tax stack that you can have. So if you took into account the assessment rate and then the other taxes that are paid, there's a cap on what will allow the developer, allow the total rate to be. And so we'll take that into account as we're looking at it. There's some other limitations on lien to value ratios that have to be met in order to make those determinations. So all of that goes into a financial modeling that P3, your assessment consultant, puts together, and we look and see what can be supported at that time. But that is something that you, as council, when we do a development agreement, anytime you're doing this type of thing, have the opportunity to comment on and have the opportunity to work through it, would be presented to council.
And to add to that briefly, so for instance, from the agenda item that's following this one, each year, much like council certifies the assessment rolls for our general fund property taxes, you certify the service and assessment plan that establishes what that assessment will be on those properties next year based upon the values that are on the ground and whatever credit they got from the TERS.
And I guess I'm thinking more long-term rather than just small pictures. $53 million in PID bonds that'll be sold ultimately?
Roughly for city center specific, yes. Yes, sir.
And at some point, the value on the ground is going to appreciate enough so that the tax revenue will be sufficient to start making some payments towards that PID bond debt. I guess what I'm asking is, out of that 53 million, how much of the 70% of the tax revenue, the incremental tax revenue, is going to pay that $53 million in bond debt?
Yeah, so there is my recollection, and I'd have to go back and look at it, but my recollection is that there is a specified amount, up to amount on an annual basis that goes towards that purpose. And so again, you bought it down to a particular rate, so it's not something that adjusts on an annual basis. So as more money comes into the TERS, if you get more value that goes in and creates more increment, it doesn't necessarily lower the portion of the assessment that's being paid. You're still going to have an assessment that's there, that's payable every year, and you've just used increment.
Payable by who?
The property owner.
Okay. So, but on the PID, the property owner can elect to,
Prepay.
here's my total, I'm writing a check, I'm done.
Yes, sir.
At that point, what happens to the TERS dollars that are the 70% of what's going to pay that?
So the TERS dollars are still flowing into the TERS, right? And so the assessment, I believe, would be offset to adjust for those items. And Kyle, if you're.
No,
Yeah.
once, if they prepay the assessment in full, then they no longer receive any TERS credit.
Correct, yes.
So that money.
Becomes free money
that would
for the
then-
TERS.
It would go into the TERS fund, and then the additional funds that are.
We will repeat it.
expended would then flow to the city.
Yeah, so.
As a property owner, I have no incentive to pay it early.
Yeah, and honestly, as a property owner, you probably never have any incentive to pay early because.
The PID bonds were sold at 7%, right?
Right, but you're still paying the total amount of your assessment for the life of the assessment, whether you pay it early or you pay it late, right? So you've got a certain amount that's been assessed on your property that you're responsible for paying. And so that amount is going to be paid. There's not really any incentive ever to prepay the assessments.
Because it's a fixed amount.
Because it's a fixed amount.
It's not going to change.
Whether it's, you're paying it over 20 years, it's still $1 million, because they're not accruing interest against that. Now, that is, the TERS is paying for it, to your point. The TERS is having to pick up that interest over the life of that 20 years that they're gonna pay that $1 million.
Up to a cap, though. So we capped it both at a 70% and then an annual contribution cap that Jonathan was referring to.
I'll let you go back to it.
You go ahead.
May I?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So earlier, we were talking about the valuations that you came up with to discern which proportion the TERS was going to pay for and how the PID assessment itself was concluded. Who came up with the valuations of the future development of the property? I mean, is that something that was, you had an appraisal done, or was it the developer provided you with some rough idea of what he thought, and did anybody vet that?
So when PID bonds are issued, there is an appraisal that goes along with that to show what the value of the property is. And then Kyle, I mean, Kyle's with P3. I don't know if you want to talk about just general from when y'all are preparing your reports, how that ultimately gets built in.
Yeah, so as Jonathan mentioned, there is an appraisal that will be done when we issue PID bonds. For the TERS calculation in the original project and finance plan that was approved in 2004, there is a feasibility study attached to that that does project out the long-term value of the development. We generated that document.
And where were your market comps? I was curious, because there was some comps on there I'd scratch my head at.
So the values that are provided by the developer when we prepare the report.
But y'all also evaluated it based upon the location to see if they're within ballpark. It's not a blind acceptance.
Yeah, we don't blindly accept them. And then it was approved by the city council when we prepared it. And so we have seen in other jurisdictions that some jurisdictions will order separate market studies that are done, but again, that is a decision that we would leave to the city council to direct it.
But I think it's important to understand that when you do go to market, that you do have an appraisal that is available to bondholders, and it's a separate third-party appraisal that gets done.
The benefit and the fail-safe and the agreements are if the values are never achieved, then the property owner is responsible for a greater portion of that debt burden from their PID assessments, meaning they don't get the benefit of the tax increment. So let's say the developer in this particular instance oversold the valuation at the end of the project. They're now going to have to shoulder more of those debt service payments over the life of that PID and get not the benefit of the TERS. Are the customers, but it's always the customers at the end of the day when.
That's the part I'm a little worried about, right, Murad? When you think about it, let's just say one of these developers has bought a piece of property, he's developing it, and he's thinking, okay, so I've done some analysis. The TERS is going to take care of this component of this at some point. Let's just call it $1 million again for the sake of this. I've got 20 payments to pay off this $1 million over time, and that's capped, but they've also probably built in quite a bit of, shall we say, value in the TERS paying down that debt as well. So I'm worried that that may have got oversold to them because we don't have any control over that, right?
No, but we hear that all the time. So every piece of property that is developed in Friendswood, or anywhere for that matter, the total cost of the long-term associated with that property is always shouldered by the end user, whether that's the homeowner or the person that's leasing the facility. And so it's incumbent on them to evaluate that stuff when they go purchase property. So I've heard anecdotally that the property owners in the city center were unaware that they had to pay a PID assessment. Well, that's absolutely not true. There are disclosures that are included in all the closings. And if you're pursuing a multi-million-dollar investment, you would think you would hire your own attorneys to evaluate whatever it is you're purchasing.
It is in the deed records. It's filed in the deed records. There are disclosures that have to be.
Point of sale disclosure, you got a
Absolutely.
closing disclosure.
Absolutely.
You have another question? I'm sorry we're taking all this, but we weren't here.
Go for it. This is for you guys.
Thank you.
Murad, you and I discussed this before about the city center development. The contractor is billing the developer, which in this case is one and the same, at the full amount of the engineer's estimates that were made part of the original PID agreement. And you, I believe, told me that, and I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, that he has to do that because all of the PID bond money must be spent. Am I accurately restating that?
So you, and Karen and Jonathan and Mary, feel free to jump in, but you cannot pay back the debt early on a PID bond, meaning the engineer's estimates of probable cost are what the PID bonds are based off of. And so even if they come in less than, the debt's already been issued. And so they're obligated through the PID assessments to pay the debt in totality. If they come in higher than the engineer's estimate of probable cost, then they have to eat the difference. At the end of the day, they don't get the reimbursement from the PID bond revenues, from the proceeds, unless they complete the infrastructure. So they're taking a risk or a gamble, much like any other project a developer would undertake.
So, yeah, so I would just say the key point there, I think, is that you've got bond funds that are available for the project. Anything that's in excess of those costs are developer responsibility, right? So the way that it's written, if you go above that, it's a developer responsibility to make those payments.
We're talking about what's in the agreement, and it was presented as high engineer's estimates that should be.
So to paraphrase your question, if they come in less than the engineer's probable costs, the PID bonds have already been issued.
Right, so you're making payments based on the costs that they prove up, that they can demonstrate that they paid, and you can only make payments for costs that they demonstrate can be paid. Ultimately, if it came in less, you could have some funds remaining in a project fund that could ultimately be utilized as stated in your master indenture. So your bond indenture has some extraordinary optional call language in it. It has some things along those lines that could be used to redeem some debt over time if you ever didn't do that. But they've got to deliver on the project that they said that they're going to deliver on from a public infrastructure standpoint, and you're paying for that public infrastructure.
You want this softball? Go ahead.
Well, just to finish that question, do all the bonds have to be sold? In other words, just like
So all the bonds have been sold.
for the first part.
For the first part, yes. Then you've got other improvements that are going to be done, right? So you, in this case, you had some master improvements, and then you have some additional master improvements that are going to get done. They were not all issued at the same time. You are going to come back because it's part of completing the project as a whole. Some of these are pieces of the project that fit together that actually have to be finished in order to finalize what the city bargained for as part of its development agreement. So in your development agreement, they said they are going to deliver on this project with this public infrastructure that's going to be done, and you'll hold their kind of feet to the fire to get that public infrastructure done as part of this. Now, when they issue that debt, they still have some other obligations in order to issue additional debt. So in this particular case, there's an additional bonds test that they have to meet before the additional debt can be met. And so that requires a 4-to-1 value to lien ratio that's on the ground before they can issue any additional debt. And they've got to have at least 7 vertical buildings started in process in order to do that. So that gives bondholders and the public a little bit more protection before you're issuing additional debt out there in order to complete the project.
They have to go vertical on so many buildings before the next round of bonds.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
That all ties into the financial model that our financial analysts, separate from P3, looked at in order for the viability of those bonds. So
you mentioned something that Randy kind of hit on. I don't know if you picked up on it, but the developer is also the general contractor. And in the case where he had the OPCs come in from the engineer, he is incentivized highly to have his cost match those OPCs, regardless of what the subcontractor costs are. He'll take the profit margin in between and put it in his pocket. So I'm curious, as counsel for the city, what were your thoughts on protecting us from that kind of cost overrun? I mean, I think we were okay with, I guess, the OPC, but there was nothing in there to protect us from that being an inappropriate cost, other than just an opinion of probable cost from an engineer. I'm a developer, so I have engineers develop OPCs for me all the time, and I know the range of what my OPCs look like. So that's.
I will say the OPCs were vetted by city attorney, or not by the city attorney, but the city engineering. And so those were vetted costs by the city through the city's team.
Okay.
What's an OPC?
It's an estimate of, it's
Opinion of probable cost.
It's an engineer's opinion of cost. I mean, they can be called different things, but those were vetted, and that was a big part. And there was a lot of back and forth actually during that process about whether these were appropriate costs and what could be dealt with. But that's, I mean, it's a team approach. Anytime you're working on this, you've got your assessment consultants that you're working with, you've got the city's team, you've got your outside financial advisor that works on this. So there are a lot of eyes that are looking at it from the city's standpoint.
back to your original point. If there's leftover funds, it can only be applied to other eligible projects within the PID. And so it can't be paid back. And as we see on our own projects, and I know you see it on your own projects in development, the cost of construction has changed drastically over the last several years and continues to go up. I've yet to see it go down without having a recession. So the likelihood of the developer just giving a large number for the sake of giving a large number, and then being the subcontractor and building it far less so they can pocket more funds, are not very high.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind, council members, as you're looking at this, is that they've got a certain amount of debt that's going to be issued. They've got a certain amount that the city can be responsible for, and then they're responsible for any cost above that.
And I get that.
And so that's a significant governor on the developer, because at some point he's biting into his returns.
Go back to the project plan, though, that was already approved. If the cost came under that, we would have those dollars eligible to pay for the future cost of the future projects, right?
Particularly inside of the TERS, right?
Inside the TERS.
And you could change your project plan inside of the TERS longer.
We didn't exactly structure it for it to be the lowest cost project possible, especially since, we're paying 70% of it as the taxpayers of the city.
So again, I want to be really clear about that because that full 70% is not buying down the.
Not all of it.
Not all of it is for
get
that
it.
purpose. Some of that goes into the TERS and is available for general TERS projects. I think it's also important to remember there is a big drainage component that's being dealt with as part of this. It was a major city piece.
Big project.
There is a fire department or, fire station that's being constructed as part of this. That's a major piece. And so the TERS dollars, given the way it's structured, there's some limitations on what you could use PID dollars for as it related to the fire station. So it's important to have a significant amount of funds running through the TERS so that the fire station could actually be constructed. So I just want to be really clear that not all of this is going to pay down those particular costs, that a lot of this are going to things that were city priorities.
They're actual city projects.
In order to make sure that and that's the other key piece. Anything that you're spending on this ultimately is being spent to pay for public infrastructure that's being dealt. That's what you're authorized to utilize these funds for, is public infrastructure.
And the other note here is that these programs cannot be put in place unless the project, they're put in place for the projects that wouldn't have otherwise happened. We have seen over the lifetime of this particular property, multiple attempts by developers of various sizes, both bigger and smaller than who currently is developing it, and they weren't able to exceed the barrier to entry, meaning the economics associated with it, without an incentive. And so that's why this was put into place. Whether or not it was a good deal at the end of the day is everybody can play armchair quarterback, but once the agreements are adopted, they're legally binding and we have to comply with them.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to take a moment to address the OPC question. So the original, when they do the original PID bonds, it is based on cost estimates. So once those bonds are approved and the project fund is fully funded, the developer has to submit draw requests for reimbursement. In order for those draw requests to be approved, they have to submit invoices, all bills paid affidavits, and then any additional supporting documentation that may go along with that. So it's not just the developer can say, I said this drainage was 5 million and I'm going to get paid 5 million. He has to submit individual line itemed invoices for every dollar he's spending.
Literally drafted him himself for each one of those. He paid himself as the GC to do these projects, and then he hired a subcontractor to move the dirt.
So, but we would need.
The subcontractor didn't provide a bill for $5.40 a cubic yard. He may have provided a bill for $4 a cubic yard, and then the developer provided a receipt to the city of a bill that he paid to himself for $5.40 a cubic yard, or whatever it was. I can't remember anymore what the dollar per cubic yard was. So that's why when I saw that, before I got elected, I was like, this is really curious. This isn't how I've ever seen this done in a development. And again, I'm a developer. So it started raising questions. And so I'm not questioning that you've reviewed those progress pay estimates and that he has submitted bills to pay himself effectively. I'm more curious, well, sometimes we'll get into the fact that he didn't pay his subcontractors on a regular basis. And there's been liens filed on this multiple times. So that's of concern.
So I will say, just as it relates to the lien question, the development agreement is very clear that you have to have payment and performance bonds as it relates to the projects for the infrastructure that are associated with that. He has an obligation prior to being reimbursed for anything to have paid any liens that are on it at the lesser of.
But has he?
The repayment, yes. For each thing that he's gotten repaid on, there is my understanding, and Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, that the affidavits have all been paid and the release of lien has been provided for. The other important part, again, is you've got the payment and performance bond. That's another piece that's back there. He has to release any liens that are on the property the earlier of repayment or 180 days after a lien has been filed. So that has to be taken care of. So there are a number of protections that are built into the document as the city as it relates to those types of issues before you can be reimbursed. And if he weren't to take care of those within the time periods and those things, that's a potential event of default that the city would have. under
What's
the.
our recourse in that?
That was going to be my question. As a board member, a board of director of this TERS and PID and the PID bonds, what authority do I have if the developer fails to comply with the development agreement? Now, if for any reason, whether it be health reasons, whether it be financial or whatever reason, maybe incompetence, if he fails or she fails, I'm not saying one or the other, if they fail to comply with the business development agreement, what authority do I have to go around that individual as the developer in the development agreement? And if there is a succession, what is the succession if there's a financial failure? What authority do I have to have another developer or authorize another developer within the tax increment revenue zone to take over the activities of that developer so that the project will get done? We've been sitting on this project now, and I know that several people can drive down 528 and see the 2,800 home development horizontals already in. All the public infrastructure's in. Houses are going up. We have another development right over here, 11 acres, that it took less than 7 or 8 months. We've been sitting on this since 2024. And my understanding is the permits for TxDOT haven't been made, lift stations haven't been made. The failure on the part of the person that we are contracted with as the developer, what is our authority as board of director to remove him and maybe get someone in there who can do the development? Or do we even have that authority as directors?
So I would need to go back and look at the development agreement in particular on any particular event of default that's ultimately there. So generally, what the development agreement requires is that if there is an event of default, he's got a cure period that's associated with it. Part of what the event of default would do, it doesn't allow you to go ahead and replace the developer. It would allow you to kind of find a default ultimately there as it relates to bonds. If you've got a developer that's in default and you've got proceeds of the bonds, the proceeds of the bonds are there in order to complete kind of the construction that's ultimately there. And we'd have to play through what that would look like. But again, if you're working through the process, there's timelines that are laid out inside of the documents. There's a bit of flexibility as it relates to getting those done.
You really can't go around the developer.
No, it's not a situation.
That's a lot.
And you've sold all the bonds, so when he's in default, and just play with me here, play along. If for some reason he could no longer continue on, what is the recourse of the community to help that project complete? Because we not only put our faith and credit, and you're going to say the credit's not, but at the same time, we sold the bonds. If he fails, for whatever reason, what is our path forward as a community to get that project completed? Because we also are depending on a lot of those sales tax revenues that are on that. We're also hopefully...
They're not tied to the agreement.
I know they're not. But our operational costs and our forward-looking operational budgets are looking at those things. I know Katina's not putting that in there, but I've heard repeatedly at public meetings that when city center's done, those sales tax revenues will take care of that.
So what was referred to is when city center's done and it reaches a valuation of $750 million, the 30% of revenue that we would realize, not sales tax, but property taxes, would cover our operational cost. If the developer fails and the project is never realized, there are no operational costs. There is, for us right now, there is
No,
nothing.
that wasn't what I was referring to. This was a drainage district meeting where one of the board members was saying the city can take over drainage because city center is going to pay for it. Okay, so it's unrelated, and you weren't there, and I get it.
That's not city staff speaking that.
I didn't say it was. I'm just saying, some people have decided that there's revenue to be had from this project, and I agree, and we're all wanting it to succeed. But what is the path forward if he fails?
So again, when you've issued this debt, you've got funds that are available to pay for the infrastructure, right? Because what you as the city have bargained for is the construction of the infrastructure on the project, right? And so you would utilize the funds, if the developer were to go away, one, you would foreclose on the property, right?
How long is that going to
Typically what would happen in that circumstance, you haven't seen this happen maybe one instance that I can think of where there was a potential for this, and the lender stepped in and paid the assessments and things along those lines, and kind of continued the process and ended up taking over for the developer.
That's my question. We have developers out there that are ready to develop but can't because the permits aren't in place, and that's not city permits. These are permits that are required from TxDOT and these other attorneys. I understand that we're going to allow them, but we have people that are ready to go vertical but can't because the developer has not been able to finish what he's supposed to do. And that's a real frustration for those people who aren't the developer, of this property.
I understand. So, two things. One, the private individuals that you're referring to have permits to go vertical, and that's a risk that they're taking without having the adequate infrastructure to serve their ultimate project. It's no different than a landlord-tenant standpoint. If you're under contract with a landlord to rent their facility and they're not fulfilling their obligation in their agreement, that's a private matter between the tenant and the landlord. The city has every incentive, though, to help out to make sure that this project is a success. So by all means, I had offered you, if you'd like, I'd sit down with individuals to.
Developer that there are people who have money in their hand, and some have borrowed it, some don't have to borrow it, but they're waiting, and that's costing them money. And it's costing them money because of the failure of the person that we are in a development agreement with. And I know that in TERS 2, that's going to be whenever that is settled. But in TERS 1, there really needs to be some mechanism by which, if this person can't do the job for whatever reason, it may be health, it may be financial, it may be whatever the reason, that we as the board of director can have the authority to issue that obligation to somebody else who can finish it. And it's almost what I brought up on TERS 2 development agreement when I voted against that. And that was, we as council or as board of directors should have the ability, if the developer in the developer agreement can't pay the person who did the work, we can go around that developer and pay it. And that's exactly what that developer said he would do, and y'all all said, no, Robert, you don't want to do that.
I don't want to do that.
Everybody said they don't want to do that, but we're sitting here now, and we're not getting something done and completed, and we're running on January 2024?
Correct, was the development agreement, and then the PID bonds were issued in 2026, if I remember correctly. 25, sorry, 25. And again,
Time's of the essence, Mo.
time is definitely of the essence.
We're having debt out there, and we're wanting incremental values placed on the ground to pay the PID bonds.
Again, the PID bonds are paid by the assessments, which, as long as the developer still owns the property, is really paid by the developer, right? That's the other piece of this. He's really incentivized to kind of get the project finished and to move it on, because he wants to send those off to someone else in order to ultimately make those payments.
He was capable.
No, but again, from a big picture standpoint, it boils down to tenant and landlord situation right now. But from a big picture standpoint, the city's not out anything. Our obligation is the public infrastructure component, of which we have the PID bond proceeds to complete it if the developer doesn't fulfill their obligation. The developer and all the people that they sold property to are the ones that are paying those PID assessments. So, for instance, on TERS 2,
That he sold the properties to are relying on someone to get the job done that can't get the job done.
correct. And if I bought a piece of property from somebody, I would be pissed off, but it would be incumbent on me to take action to get the contract fulfilled. And in this particular situation, the city's willing to provide assistance to achieve that because there's an incentive for us. But TERS 2, for instance, we have a developer that we executed a development agreement with that was foreclosed on. The city is out zero. So that property can't move forward without a new development agreement. There are no outstanding bonds. Is it ideal? No, but without the development agreement, we weren't able to achieve some environmental control and oversight that we wanted to achieve. So all of these have been put in place specifically to achieve a greater purpose for the community, and it's been complicated, I agree. But
And like I have said before, I I'm in favor of tax increment revenue zones over other management districts because I think they're superior to it. I'm also in favor of public infrastructure debt because I think it's superior to the municipal utility district debt, which sometimes doesn't go away, but I know that's not happening in some, but that's why I've always thought this was superior. What I've always had the drawback on was the development agreement that, that did not, I felt, in my opinion, give us the control that we needed to make this happen. And the reason that I say that, because in joint operating agreements, when I was the operator, there was the ability to remove the operator if he wasn't doing the right thing. In this situation, you don't have the same ability to remove an operator/developer if he's not doing the right thing. And I like the developer. I have no problems with him. He's a family man here in Friendswood, and I wish him all the best. But that doesn't mean that business isn't business, you know? And I wish him all the best, and I want him to succeed, and then we put it there. Okay, sure.
So after 3 hours of bond and drainage, the cognitive load in here, I may have reached my maximum. But there are some inferences that are being made here that I think we need to kind of clear up, you know, and so bottom lining it. But on the inference of a question that either Randy or Michael asked. So if a contractor and the developer are the same thing, and one charges the other, and they pay, and according to him, it was really not quite as much as maybe he could have gotten it. It doesn't really matter to us, does it, to the city? Because he's going to pay what he has to pay in this TERS and PID and the assessments.
Yes, yes, correct. He has.
So he can say, I had to pay $7 for this dirt instead of $5, but now I got this for $3 instead of whatever it is.
But what's paying for that is the debt that was already issued, that he's paying the debt service on.
And he's paying the debt
And
service.
to the extent that the expenses are high, on the high end.
Yes.
He's hurting himself because
He's
he's
hurting-
going to have to pay.
He's hurting
he's gonna have to
himself,
pay that
that's
out.
right.
What percent is the TERS paying of that PID debt?
Of the PID debt, I mean, Kyle, do you have?
But it was
We
70%.
keep saying that,
I'd have to go back and look at the.
but it's not
assessment.
zero.
Well, right now, it's pretty darn close to zero because there's not a lot of value on the ground.
Because I got the value, but.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so as far as we're concerned, I mean, because there are people that don't trust him, don't like him, I'm just going to put the elephant out in the room and say it. And so there's all these little inferences, but the bottom line for us, the only question that I think really is what Robert asked. Is there anything as a board that we should do to be able to move that along, to ensure the viability, is there any responsibility we have? We're having the bills checked, where everything is legally checked, everything's legal. He's not moving very fast. He has a track record of that right now for the last couple of years. It's causing some PR problems. It may be causing other problems, but what do we have as a board? What responsibility?
You do not have any responsibility as it relates to that, right? The debt has been issued, you've got the funding on hand in order to construct the infrastructure, right?
Okay.
So the developer is going to be responsible ultimately for doing that. He's ultimately harmed by not getting that taken care of, right?
Okay.
Because he's paying those assessments over time while this project is being completed.
And if he goes bankrupt, his lenders take care of all that, or we assume the
There'll be a
property.
process where that would step in, there would be a foreclosure process that would go on, and the project would, the public infrastructure, those funds have been issued solely for the purpose of building the public infrastructure.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Just a brief one. So if he filed for bankruptcy, because Trish just hit on it, how long would it be until those funds would be where somebody else could pick up the project and move forward?
So, again, I'd have to go back and take a look. So bankruptcy, it is an event of default under the terms of the development agreement. I need to go back and look at that. If he failed
We
to
could
pay.
do all this offline.
Right, if he failed to pay the assessments, right, we could look at that. That's when foreclosure would become an option. That's probably, if foreclosure really became an option, is when you would see a lender step in.
Most likely the bondholder, right? If the lender didn't have too much skin in the game?
Say that again?
Bondholders would probably do the foreclosure. I mean, I think they have first lien rights.
No, the city, I mean, the city, it's just like a tax.
So it is like a.
It's like a tax foreclosure.
Okay, so, okay, I was a little
Yeah.
confused on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's like a
As of
tax.
today, everything's good.
Everything is paid for as of today.
So
In
we're
fact,
just asking about future problems that haven't occurred yet.
That's correct.
Emphasizing. Yes, okay.
But there are mechanisms we could deal with if y'all had questions about that, and we need time, we can work through those issues. Yes.
Well, Jonathan, Mary, thank you for being here. Kyle, thanks a lot. You guys have got more than you bargained for probably tonight, but they're all good information. I love the discussion, and I appreciate you guys being here. With that, I'm going to move on to item 8B, consider on first reading. Where are you going?
She'll be back in a second. But everybody, I need to take a break. She'll be back in a second.
You may or may not need her vote.
She gave me her proxy, Mayor.
Can't take it, sorry. Oh, Kyle.
Okay. Yeah, so this item tonight is the annual service plan update. So the original service plan was for the Public Improvement District was approved back in 2004 each year. There's a statutory requirement that the City Council review the updated 5-year service plan, which is 5-year budget outlook, and approve the updated assessment rolls for 2026. Those assessment rolls will be billed by Galveston County, I believe, on 1/31/27, due 1/31/27 on the tax bill for those parcels. So this year, the annual installment came out to about $4.7 million is going to be this year's annual installment. Currently, Mr. Tanos, the developer, does own all the parcels, so he will be responsible to make those annual installment payment that's due 1/31/27. I will also just point out, if you look at the assessment roll, you may notice that for property ID, it currently lists TBD. There was a plat that was filed by Mr. Tanos back in late 2025, and the Harris Central Appraisal District did not correctly subdivide that parcel yet and assign property IDs. We are in contact with them, and after going through a few different people, we finally found the proper people at Harris Appraisal District who are going to correct that and assign property IDs. So when we do prepare the billing roll that gets set to the county in October, we will update those TBDs with the appropriate IDs.
So right now, under the city center, there's one owner?
There are a few different LLCs, but it is owned by,
Each of the LLCs owned by?
by the developer still currently owns.
So there's multiple property owners on the front parcels that are reflected in the plat. Unfortunately, the Harris County Central Appraisal District didn't accurately reflect all the ownership corresponding to their acreages that they own. Everybody's paid their PID assessments that exist out there for that property.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay.
Mayor?
Just before you vote, there is a red line of the ordinance at your place, so if you move to approve, if you would approve those red lines. The red lines just deal with instructions to staff on what to do, how to file the ordinance, where to file it, who all needs copies of it, so.
We don't have to read the whole thing.
Just the red line?
No, you don't have to read the red line. All I have to do is consider on first reading an ordinance approving the 2026 annual update to the service and assessment plan and assessment roll for the Friendswood City Center Public Improvement District, including the collection of annual installments. That includes the red lines, everything in the document that we have in front of us. So I would take a motion.
I'll second the motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Unanimous. Thanks.
How that
Kyle.
worked?
What?
That worked real well. We got right through that.
Yeah, that was a snap, yeah. All right. Item 9, committees or special reports receive the West Ranch Management District's annual report. Dennis, we have it in our backup material. Dennis Barber, one of our,
Material?
I know you came out, you brought Sherry, very nice of you.
Cheerleader.
Well, rah-rah, if you, we have it, we are willing to accept it without further ado, but if you want to take the stage for a minute, go ahead.
You waited a long time to talk.
You waited a long time. I'm sorry if you thought that you were going to speak,
Well,
but
very
you
quickly.
can speak.
At one point, as you know, there are 5 board members. I'm one of the resident members. The other one, at some point, when he quits being a rock star, he will come here and to deliver. You probably remember the rock star days. Back when you were traveling around after
I
your
did not
mission.
go around the moon, so, yeah.
Oh, Reed Wiseman.
Reed Wiseman, but
Didn't you invite Reed to give this?
I did. He said he had a thing with President Trump tonight, so I said, well, I mean, I'm your mayor.
That was yesterday.
President, mayor.
Your mayor.
Didn't work. He's not here, so.
Not
go
going to
ahead.
waste much time on the.
We are glad that you're here,
Know where
Dennis.
West
Forget
Ranch
about that other guy. I didn't even remember his name.
The map here just kind of shows the West Ranch area. If you look at the bottom part, the only thing that's left are commercial properties. At the bottom of this slide, in the purple, that's Klein and the Montessori School. The 2 red ones across West Boulevard from them are sold, but I don't know what's going there. You guys probably have better insight into that than I do. But the lots have been sold. So the ones that are left are the 3 that border along 518. And here I would like to call your attention to line number 7. Just kidding. You don't need to look at this. I actually wanted this slide to go away, but our attorneys felt like we needed, since we were giving you this level of information in the past, that we should continue to do it. What I preferred is this slide, which just talks about our tax rate.
Great.
You all should be.
Our tax rate for 2025 was 20 cents. We haven't set it for 26 yet. I can only speak for myself, but it's hard to see an increase. So at worst case, I think it'll be flat or lower, I hope. But we haven't received any of the information from the appraisal district. And as you know, the appraisal district's the other half of that equation, right? So even though we're lowering the tax rate, are the people actually seeing the benefit? And the answer is yes. The tax rate's been lowered at a higher rate than the values of the properties have gone up. So the average homeowner, if there is such a thing, has seen an actual decrease in their actual tax bill from the management district. One of the things I would say over the last 7 years, we've spent quite a bit of money, over $300,000 in additional erosion repair and those kind of things. And one of the things that's, I think that cost appears to be going up for us and for our HOA, and I'm guessing the same thing is going to be happening across the city. We're seeing a lot more erosion as a result of e-bikes, doing quite a bit of damage out in the areas, predominantly on the north side of 518. So we're obviously fixing that, but any support the city can give or suggestions, we're wide open, and we'd love to have them. One of the main focuses, or what I had hoped to do when I got on this board, was let's get rid of these bonds as quick as possible. Now, the downside to doing that is we're actually earning more in interest from the state with the investments at Techstar than we are paying on the bonds. So it doesn't make sense to retire these bonds early at this point. There's about $16 million left, and they mature, all of them will mature by 2041.
Sold them at a good time.
I'm sorry?
Sold your bonds at a good time.
Yeah, and you said that everything was superior and we are inferior. That's the implication.
I said, in my opinion, I thought the tax increment revenue zones were superior to my district, in my opinion.
They're a management district.
Any question?
Yes, so.
No?
Thank you for continuing to serve, Dennis, and sorry you got that no-load Reed Wiseman as your cohort. Any chance we're going to get a third seat out of the 5?
Not till the developer's out of the picture.
They want to.
They typically like to maintain
majority.
control until they're done with their project.
Okay.
But we'll see.
All right.
So city manager's report, I will be brief. I know we've been here quite a while, and for your benefit, the U.S. is losing right now 1-0, so hopefully we can turn it around sooner as opposed to later. July is kicking off our Dive-In Movies series, so I know Parks and Rec have not been busy in June with the concerts in the park, nor did they do anything special this past weekend with the 4th of July festivities, but they're not taking very much of a break. So July 10th will be our first movie, Migration, second movie on the 17th, Jaws, and then Finding Nemo on the 24th, and then Pirates of the Caribbean. If you couldn't tell, they're all aquatic related, so it will be shown at the Stevenson Park Pool, these movies. July is also National Parks and Recreation Month. Obviously, we couldn't have the fantastic facilities we have without our Parks and Rec team and all the programming that they put into it. We agree with the rest of the country that we'd like to recognize them this month in July and thank them for all their hard work and everything they do. So James, please pass along our thanks to your team. Friendswood Library is busy as ever. They continue their reading challenge program. If you haven't seen the reel with the panda bear and the T-Rex at the getting a book out of the Autoland, I encourage you to look it up on social media. It's very entertaining. 300 people attended the summer reading kickoff party in May. 1,250 have participated and read over 405,000 minutes of books. More than 5,000 people attended a special summer events this first month, and 670 new library cards were issued since they started their campaign, which is. And there's a fundraiser in September, the gala September 26th, if I'm not mistaken, and to benefit the library. So if you haven't bought your ticket yet, please do so. I also want to recognize this evening 2 certified public managers on our team, one in our police department, Captain James Price, and then one in our EMS, Captain David Weindel. Both graduated for the CPM program at the Harvard of the South, University of Houston, go Cougs. The program focuses on organizational leadership, personnel management, budgeting, communication, and performance improvement and planning. So thank you and congratulations to both those guys. I also want to recognize last our Deputy Director of Finance. She recently completed the North Central Council of Government New and Emerging Finance Directors Program. She is not here this evening. This is a program that a number of our employees have gone through over the years. Most recently, I believe, Director Rhonda Blaskus completed it. It's an 8-month-long program that does a deep dive into critical issues around public finance, and it's further bolsters our ability and knowledge base. And so we're grateful for Jennifer for pursuing that. And that's it.
Thank you. Item 11, proposed ordinances and resolutions. 11A, consider an ordinance amending the city's general budget for fiscal year 2025, 2026. Is that right? 2025, 2026.
It's 2025, 20.
Budget Amendment 9, and providing for supplemental appropriation and/or transfer of certain funds.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion and second. All in favor? Okay, item 12, consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor? Up.
I was going to ask that we pull item G.
All right, can you amend that to exclude
I'll
item?
amend my motion to exclude item G as in go. I was hoping it would go.
I'll be quick. I promise.
Okay,
I second that amendment.
okay, I got a motion and a second. All in favor of everything but G? Okay, so item 12G, consider authorizing a contract with Construction Masters of Houston, Inc. for the Black Hawk Precast Perimeter Wall Replacement Project through the Harris County Department of Education Choice Partners Cooperative Contract Number. I'm not going to read it. So go ahead.
Okay. It's $225,000 for 780 feet of masonry wall. That's, according to my calculations, about $283 per foot, if I've got that worked out right. I did drive around the building. We have an iron fence that's in very bad shape, but scraping, painting is repairable. 2 questions. Are the gates going to remain that are there now, whatever gets replaced on the wall?
I will defer to our Public Works Director if he can answer, our Parks Director, either one of them.
So the masonry wall is to replace the existing masonry wall that's in disrepair. It goes around the building.
So the iron fence is going to stay?
It'll stay.
Okay. And that masonry wall can't be cleaned up or whatever?
It's crumbling and falling down. There's actually wood panels in the back of the building.
All I needed to know.
Okay.
Okay, can I get a motion on 12?
Move we approve G.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good meeting.
So, I'm sorry. Ever since I turned 70.
Tied?
Wait.
We gotta go?
Go! 70. You do this.